Chapter 123. Even before that, CAA had bundled more than 150 movies in just over 4 years after 1985, and they had more than a third of the TV series market share. Therefore, the turmoil during this period was caused by competitors and producers who had their profit margins reduced. They knew they couldn't affect CAA too much, but they couldn't help but spit at them. From Eric's point of view, CAA's winning formula was its unique business model. Therefore, even after Michael Ovitz left CAA was able to continue to develop without any hindrance. Although many people in the media tried to uncover the reason for CAA's growth, they only made some specious analysis. Most of them didn't hit the nail on the head. Therefore, Eric had this idea. How could he not take advantage of such a good opportunity? If it weren't for CAA, Wind and Moon would have been produced with the original cast. Although Eric was confident in Al Pacino's acting skills, he was also worried that replacing the original Richard Gere would affect the movie's box office. Fortunately, the result was not bad. Then, when inviting Cruise and Hanks, CAA created a series of problems. Now that the supporting roles of Doc War were all confirmed and the preparations were almost complete, the two main male leads were still not confirmed. Since you don't have any objections, I'll ask Alan to contact the newspaper to publish it? Caper nodded, then suddenly said, "Don't worry, let me make a copy first. I plan to study it carefully. Maybe I can use it to optimize UTA's business model." "Up to you." Eric nodded. He got up and turned on the photocopier in his office. As he made copies, he said, "Actually, Caper, I don't plan to expand UTA too much in the next few years, because I'm not capable enough. You don't know, but a few days ago, when I was preparing for Doc War, I realized how weak I was. I took a fancy to the National Bank building and wanted to shoot a few scenes on the rooftop. After I contacted them, the management of the building directly rejected me. They said they were afraid of affecting the normal order of the company in the building. They didn't even give me a chance to persuade them. After the producer from Columbia came over, he only made a few phone calls and met with their director to settle the matter. Originally, I was proud of my achievements in the previous few movies, but now, the more I think about it, the more ridiculous it is. I'm just a little loach." Caper advised, "Eric, you don't have to be like this. You're already doing very well. Think about your age. You're not even 19 years old, right? How many people at your age can earn billions with their own two hands?" This is the same as what Jeffrey told me." Eric smiled and handed the photocopied script to Kapoor. "Take it. By the way, it's the Oscars in a few days. Help me prepare for it. I'm really too busy." Eric smiled and handed the photocopied script to Kapoor. "I have to attend a rehearsal in these 2 days. I shouldn't have agreed to be the guest presenter. I really don't know what to say about you. Those small celebrities will do anything to show their faces at the Oscars, but you find it troublesome to be the guest presenter." Caper smiled and said, "Have you confirmed your female companion?" "I originally wanted to bring Jenny. She said she would return to Los Angeles at the end of the month, but she called last night and said she might not be able to come back. She'll have to wait until the beginning of April. Anyway, I'm not sure about the time. Let her be. If she can't make it, I'll bring Drew along, just like the Golden Globe Awards." Caper nodded and expressed that he understood. "By the way, I received another movie that wants to invite Drew to act in. I think the script is good. Should I continue to reject it?" "Reject it. I don't plan to let Drew take on any movies for the next 2 years." Caper nodded. He thought for a while and said, "If that's the case, then I suggest that you don't bring Drew along for the Oscars. This is a good publicity opportunity. You can bring Miss Madsen or the British mixed blood beauty you picked last week. She has already been approved by Al and Martin. Oh, and Brooke Shousey. For the sake of publicity for the movie you invested in, I suggest that you bring one of the 3 of them." Then, Eric lowered his head and thought for a while. The one who needed this opportunity the most was Virginia. She needed to single-handedly support the movie Scary Island. It would be very beneficial for her to show her face on the Oscars red carpet. Knowing a woman by scent, had Al Pacino supporting it. Dark Battle had Cruise, Hanks, and himself. It didn't matter if Brooke Shields went or not. Vicky, then. Tell her to get ready. Caper raised his eyebrows and said in a serious tone, "No problem, I'll help her get ready. But Eric, in front of outsiders, it's best if you don't call Miss Madsen so intimately." Eric noticed that although Caper's tone was businesslike, there was an obvious teasing in his eyes. He coughed awkwardly and said, "Okay, I'll be careful." After Caper left, Eric handed the draft of CAA's Revelation to Alan to contact the news agency. He continued to work until he got off work before driving to Hank's appointment. After meeting with Hanks at a high-end restaurant in Beverly Hills, Eric did not rush to talk about poaching Hanks. Instead, he talked about Dark Battle. Although Hanks had a hunch about Eric's purpose, he did not think that jumping ship to UTA was a good idea. She was happy to talk to Eric about this topic that he was more interested in. Because of CAA's offer without any profit sharing, Hank's contract with Firefly could be signed in a few days, so Hank's participation in the movie was already set in stone. Actually, I originally planned to set Sean as a police officer who had to leave the Special Weapons and Tactics Team, SWAT, because of his injury and become a civilian, but he was unwilling to be left out. But I think that if this setting was pointed out in the movie, it would be difficult for the audience to accept. So, I decided to make this setting completely vague to give the audience some room for imagination. Hanks put down his cutlery and wiped the corners of his mouth. He curiously said, "Didn't we discuss this issue last time? And we also made a new setting for Sean's background. By the way, you didn't mention this detail last time? Because this setting is a bit evil. Didn't you read the script? The reason why Sean doesn't pick up girls, go to nightclubs, or start a family is related to his injury. He doesn't want to hold up other women." Hanks paused for a second and quickly understood. He grinned and said, "This setting is a bit hard to accept. If it were me, I would also make Sean's background vague." The two chatted for more than half an hour before they finished dinner. Eric called the waiter to take away the cutlery and put on the coffee. He then said, "Tom, actually, I invited you to dinner tonight because..." Hanks interrupted Eric. "Eric, I think I'm doing well at CAA, so I don't plan on changing agencies for the time being. Don't you want to hear my conditions first?" Eric was not angry. He continued to speak with a smile. "It's just a lower commission. CAA's commission for me isn't very high, Eric. If I suddenly change agencies, I don't know how long it will take me to adapt to the new environment. And to be honest, although I know Capel Sid is a very capable agent, UTA's scale is too small. Al Pacino and Julia Roberts, two A-level superstars, already occupy most of the resources. I don't think UTA can spare enough energy for me." Eric was surprised by Hank's clear analysis, but he understood after thinking about it. Although Hanks looked simple-minded, how could an actor who had achieved success in Hollywood not be a smart person? "Listen to my conditions first. It's not a lower commission or anything like that. This is the lowest level trick." Eric smiled and waved his right hand. "As long as you change to UTA, I can arrange at least 5 films for you in the next 10 years. Hank's eyes widened in surprise. 5 films in 10 years? What kind of concept was that? Tom Cruise had debuted in 1981, and in the past 10 years, he only had one movie, Top Gun, that had a box office of more than 100 million. Rain Man, which could have broken the box office of more than 100 million, had a box office of less than 80 million because of the appearance of Eric's Home Alone. Whether it could break the box office of more than 100 million still depended on how much box office the movie could bring after the Oscars. "Is it the local box office?" Hanks asked subconsciously. Eric smiled. "Of course. In 10 years, at least 5 films in North America will break the 100 million box office." He thought for a moment and added, "And they're all male leads." But Hanks didn't let Eric's promise get to his head. "How can I believe that you're telling the truth? Even though your previous movies have grossed over $100 million, it doesn't mean that you'll do the same in the future. We can sign a secret contract." If I can't arrange at least 5 films in 10 years that break the 100 million box office, then I'll pay you a lot of money. Eric said without hesitation. Of course, you have to act in a certain number of films. If you sign the contract and just sit there and wait to collect money, then I definitely won't pay the compensation. Hanks was amused by Eric's last sentence. Of course I won't do that. I like acting. If I can't continue to be an actor, I really don't know how to live. You have to understand that when a person is used to something and suddenly stops, it'll probably be so boring that he'll want to die. Then, do you agree? Hanks still shook his head. Eric, although I'm very tempted by your words, I still won't agree so easily. If I jump ship and you can't fulfill your promise, then how much compensation can I get in 10 years? 10 million or 20 million, it's insignificant compared to the loss of my career. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. This dinner was very enjoyable. Eric, if you have time, I'll treat you. $100 million. Eric sat in his seat and did not move. He stared at Hanks and said firmly, $100 million, Tom. If I can't fulfill my promise, then I'll pay you $100 million. We can sign a contract and find an intermediary to notarize it. I can even set up a fund and put $100 million into it in advance. Even if your salary increases to $10 million in the future, you'll still need to film at least 1 film a year to earn $100 million. That's enough to show my sincerity, right? Hanks was finally moved. He put on his jacket slowly. Eric, are you serious? Of course, and you know, I can definitely afford it now. Then, I need to think about it. Hanks still did not nod. Okay, I'll wait for your good news. Although Eric was a little disappointed, he still smiled and gestured for Hanks to leave. Hanks put on his jacket and looked at Eric strangely before walking out of the restaurant. Eric sat in his seat and did not move. He took a sip of his coffee in disappointment. Just as he was about to pay the bill, Hanks suddenly appeared in front of him again. Eric, since you can take out $100 million as a bet, I don't understand why I'm hesitating. Hanks sat down across from Eric and waved his hand with some pride. This bet, I'll follow. Chapter 124. The next day, The Hollywood Reporter used 4 pages to publish the full text of CAA's revelation, how an agency giant was formed. Eric didn't care about the $800 fee, nor did he want the title. More importantly, he couldn't explain the source of the detailed information in the article, so he submitted it to the newspaper anonymously. The publication of the article immediately caused a stir in the Hollywood industry. The limelight almost overshadowed the 61st Academy Awards in a few days. If most of the forces were still immersed in the joy of defaming CAA, they suddenly calmed down and focused on the article, CAA's revelation. In the next few days, the entire American media was in an uproar. They all reprinted the highly professional article, and even a large number of research papers appeared. After the executives of other agencies in Hollywood read the article, they realized why they couldn't stop the rise of CAA. The film companies also completely understood why their production costs kept increasing and why they couldn't stop this trend. Michael Ovitz saw the article the moment it was published. He frowned and spent half an hour reading the article. Even he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The article's discussion of the scope of the agent's business was almost the same as his recent thoughts. It was also because of this idea that he tried to participate in the acquisition of Sony and Columbia some time ago. However, after slamming the table, Ovitz was so angry that he even had the thought of killing someone. This article was equivalent to exposing CAA's business strategy to all of its competitors. CAA's competitors could only mimic CAA's bundling strategy and didn't know the complicated operation process involved. With this article as a reference, as long as their competitors had a little ambition, they would definitely make a series of changes. Even if they couldn't completely imitate CAA's business model, they wouldn't be helpless in the face of CAA's expansion. Unfortunately, even though The Hollywood Reporter deliberately published a prominent statement on the front page looking for the author of the article, they didn't get any response. 2 days after the article was published, WMA's CEO publicly stated that if the author of the article was willing, WMA would pay 5% of its shares in exchange for the position of vice president. Although WMA's scale had been surpassed by CAA, WMA was still a century-old management company. Its scale wasn't too far off from CAA's. 5% of WMA's shares was worth tens of millions of dollars. On the same day, someone brought the manuscript of CAA's Revelation to WMA. What followed was a farce. In the midst of this storm, another change occurred in CAA. Tom Hanks chose to jump ship again after Tom Cruise and several other A-list celebrities left. This time, he didn't jump ship to WMA or ICM, but to UTA, United Elite Management Agency, which Eric personally owned. Hanks didn't leave alone. He used some unknown method to convince a top agent in CAA to jump ship with him. This led to all kinds of speculations in the industry. It wasn't easy to become a top agent at CAA. Most of them had to start from the most basic post and climb up step by step. It could take years or even decades for them to prove their ability and accumulate enough experience to become a top agent with an annual salary of $1,000,000. Once Hanks' agent left, it would be tantamount to giving up all of his accumulated experience. Even if he returned to CAA in the future, even if he was as good as any of the top agents, he would have to start from the bottom and climb up step by step. Under the witness of Kapoor, Hanks himself, his agent Simon Wilson, and the staff of a famous notary in Los Angeles, Eric and Hanks secretly signed the contract that Eric had promised. Of course, Hanks was very kind and didn't let Eric set up a $100 million bet. As for Hanks' decision to jump ship, the only thing CAA could do was ask Hanks for a small amount of liquidated damages and a cut of the remuneration for Dark War. After Hanks signed the contract with Firefly, Cruise learned about Hanks' salary conditions. As Eric expected, Cruise made a lot of concessions. In the end, the day before the Oscar ceremony, the two sides quickly signed a contract to join Dark War for $5 million and a 5% share of the North American profits. This condition was completely in line with Eric's expectations. It was finally confirmed that Dark War would start shooting on April 5th. On March 29th, after more than a month of preparation, the 61st Academy Awards was officially held at the Sacred Civic Auditorium in Los Angeles. Eric would also be the guest presenter for this year's Best Supporting Actress Award. It was said that the organizers had originally planned to invite the newlyweds, Melanie Griffith and Don Johnson. Although Don Johnson wasn't very famous, Melanie Griffith had directly jumped to the position of an A-list actress with Working Girl this year. Unfortunately, Melanie Griffith was destined to be unable to compete with Eric. After Columbia contacted the Oscar organizers, they quickly gave up on Melanie Griffith and chose the more famous Eric. Eric, can you help me take a look again? Is there any problem? In the Lincoln sedan that was slowly driving towards the Oscar red carpet, Virginia turned to Eric nervously. The girl had never dreamed that she would be able to walk on the Oscar red carpet so quickly. Her cheeks were slightly red from excitement. Eric patted Virginia's little hand and said, "Okay, you're very beautiful, Vicky. Relax." The girl was still not confident. She reached out and gently touched her hair. Then she thought of something else and asked, Eric, if Tin Soldier wins the award, will you really let me go up and accept the award on behalf of someone else? Of course. Eric nodded and said, I don't want my first award to be the Oscar for Best Animated Short Film. John Lasseter, who was supposed to attend the award ceremony, was completely in a workaholic state because of Eric's investment and delegation. He wanted to live in Pixar's office. If the Oscar invitation hadn't been sent to Richmond, John Lasseter would have almost forgotten that the short film was nominated for the Oscars. However, after receiving the invitation, John Lasseter directly called and said that he was too busy to leave. If he won the award, he would like Eric to accept it for him. Eric didn't try to persuade him. In the future, Pixar's animation would dominate the Oscars. One more wouldn't make a difference. The reason why Pixar applied for this award was mainly because they hoped to win an Oscar and attract more business for Pixar. At the same time, Eric didn't want his first award to be the Oscar for Best Animated Short Film. Therefore, he gave this opportunity to the girl beside him. As they were talking, the Lincolns stopped at the entrance of the Oscar red carpet. They could already hear the cheers of the fans from afar. Eric got out of the car first and turned to the other side of the car. He stretched out his arm in a gentlemanly manner and let the girl hold on to him. Under the guidance of the staff, they slowly walked to the red carpet. Perhaps female celebrities were born to live on the red carpet. Virginia, who was very nervous in the car, quickly relaxed when she walked on the red carpet. She gently held onto Eric's arm and followed him step by step. From time to time, she waved gently at the crowd and revealed a charming smile. When they were 7 or 8 meters away from the fans' area, someone noticed Eric's figure. Immediately, there were shouts, mixed with a few girls' pleas like, "Eric, I love you." Compared to the stars who were generally above 30 years old on the red carpet, Eric's youth and handsomeness undoubtedly had an advantage. In addition, the film Back to 17, that he acted in had just stopped airing not long ago. However, he still had a large number of fans among the young people. If it weren't for the staff maintaining order, there might have been people rushing directly to the red carpet. This kind of thing had happened before. Eric slowed down and nodded to the fans with a decent smile on his face. Immediately, there was a wave of female screams. Unknowingly, he actually had fans. Eric sighed slightly in his heart. He held on to Virginia and continued to walk forward. The girl beside him was slightly disappointed because no one called her name. She even noticed the hostility in the eyes of many female fans in the audience. This kind of feeling was only restrained when they reached the media area. "Eric, look here. Here. Eric, Virginia, can you come closer?" Compared to the fans who only paid attention to their favorite stars, the reporters in the media area easily recognized Virginia. They had long heard that Virginia was about to act in a movie that Firefly invested in and that Eric was personally responsible for writing the screenplay. With the development of Hollywood to this day, many things in the circle were already clear rules. If an unknown beautiful actress or even a handsome actor suddenly got an important role in a movie, then many people would subconsciously ask, who did he or she sleep with? These beautiful actresses or handsome men who got a chance for no reason would definitely have to pay a price. For them, other than their bodies, they had nothing to offer. Most people would not look down on these men and women. They would only envy their opportunities. The eyes of the reporters shone with the fire of gossip. They urged Eric and Virginia to be as intimate as possible while frantically pressing the shutter. Finally, they passed through the media area. While the ABC reporter caught Michelle Pfeiffer for an interview, Eric directly pulled the girl to the waiting area for the stars. "Hi, Mr. Williams, I'm Robert Downey Jr. Hello, Mr. Downey." Eric smiled and shook hands with the other party. He was just about to praise the other party's work when he realized that he did not remember any representative works of this young and bumpy movie star in his early years. He could only point to the girl next to him. "This is Virginia Madsen." Robert Downey Jr. politely shook hands with Virginia. She was just here to get acquainted with him and hoped to have a chance to cooperate in the future, so she did not pester him too much. She chatted with Eric for a while and quickly left. Eric also took the initiative to greet the others. Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, Dustin Hoffman, Melanie Griffith, Patrick Swayze, Gina Davis, Bruce Willis and his wife, Demi Moore, Cher, Jane Fonda, Jodie Foster, Sigourney Weaver. He shuttled through the crowd and chatted with these still young stars. A few minutes later, after being reminded by the staff, everyone began to enter the venue. He did not know what the organizers of this year's Oscars were thinking. They actually did not arrange a host. After entering the auditorium and finding the location of the Home Alone crew, Eric directly left his seat and walked backstage. Because he was the guest of honor, the Best Supporting Actress award was placed first. The order of the Oscars was not strictly regulated. Many times, in order to attract the attention of the audience, the organizers would first award the more important Best Supporting Actor or Best Supporting Actress. "Hello, Eric, I'm Tom Selleck." As he walked backstage, a tall and strong middle-aged man came up to him. "I'll lead you to the stage later." Eric reached out and shook the man's hand. "Thank you, Mr. Selleck. I really liked your 3 Stay-at-Home Dads and a Baby. I heard that this movie is going to be a sequel?" Three Stay-at-Home Dads and a Baby, was the annual box office champion in 1987. This warm comedy was able to win the box office title mostly because of good luck. After all, there were no famous movies in 1987. As for Tom Selleck, Eric had only seen Three Stay-at-Home Dads and a Baby. His deepest impression of him was the 20-year-old boyfriend of Monica in Friends. Eric planned to film Friends for Fox after completing Dark War. Although he had a deep impression of Tom Selleck's Monica boyfriend, Eric knew that he had to choose a newcomer. Tom Selleck's career was still at its peak. If he asked him to act in a TV series, he would definitely be scolded. When Tom Selleck heard Eric mention his proudest work, he laughed and said, "Of course, but it won't be released until next year. To be honest, I don't want to run into your movie." After about 10 minutes of opening song and dance, Eric received the envelope from the staff and walked up to the podium under Tom Selleck's guidance. All the guests' lines were previously written by the scriptwriters. Therefore, when the audience saw the celebrities' witty words on TV, it didn't actually show their speaking ability. "Wow!" Eric walked to the center of the stage and held Mike's hand. He sighed and said, "Actually, after I received the invitation, I asked Alan Carr why everyone else had a female companion on stage, but I had to be alone. It's not fair." Alan stared at me for a long time before he said, "Because you're too young." At this point, Eric blinked cutely at the audience with an innocent look on his face. The audience was silent for a second before they burst into laughter and applause. In the past 6 months, although Eric had achieved a series of amazing achievements in Hollywood, there were always people who talked about his age from time to time. Achieving such great achievements at the age of 18 seemed to have become a stain in Eric's life. When people praised geniuses, they also couldn't help but dislike them. After a few more witty words that made the audience laugh, Eric changed the topic. In any movie, when the leading actors and actresses show their acting skills, there are always supporting roles. A good supporting role will make a movie more outstanding. So, let's see what movies are nominated for Best Supporting Actress. After Eric finished speaking, he made a gesture. The movie clips of the nominees for Best Supporting Actress appeared on the big screen one after another. They were Sigourney Weaver and Joan Cusack from Working Girls, Michelle Pfeiffer from Dangerous Liaisons, Gina Davis from Unexpected Traveler, and Francis Mike Dumont from Mississippi is Burning. As far as Eric was concerned, he didn't think highly of Sigourney Weaver. The Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actress for Workaholic was a huge exaggeration. In comparison, Eric preferred Michelle Pfeiffer and Gina Davis, and he also thought that the winner should be one of them. After all the nominees were introduced, Eric slowly opened the envelope. He glanced at the name, and it was as he expected. The Best Supporting Actress is Gina Davis from Unexpected Traveler. Amidst the applause, a red-haired girl over 1.8 meters tall stood up excitedly with her hand over her mouth. She hugged the rest of the cast of Unexpected Traveler and walked onto the stage. The girl wasn't in a hurry to receive the Golden Man. Instead, she hugged Eric excitedly. Eric could only smile and pat the girl on the back. Gina Davis was already over 1.8 meters tall. Now that she was wearing high heels, she was even taller than Eric. When the two hugged, Eric looked really small. This scene caused the audience to chuckle. "Hey, Ms. Davis, can you let go of me? Are you sure you're not taking advantage of me?" Eric patted her a few times. Seeing that she was still hugging him, he had to whisper in the girl's ear. "Impatient little guy," Gina Davis whispered. She quickly let go of Eric, took the Golden Man, and began her speech. Chapter 125. After patiently waiting for Gina Davis to finish her speech, Eric walked off the stage with her and returned to his seat. What followed was a long 3 hours of running time. The nomination of Home Alone for Best Soundtrack was completely negligible. Eric just laughed at the jokes of the guests on stage over and over again. As a young man who had made great achievements in Hollywood half a year ago, Eric was ridiculed by the guests on stage more than once. Therefore, the camera often swept over him, and from time to time, there would be a close-up. In this case, Eric didn't even have a chance to be distracted. However, Eric didn't feel bored. Instead, he enjoyed comparing the differences between the Oscars more than 10 years later and now. After a few hours, Eric's biggest feeling was that the Oscars in this era hadn't taken the more extreme route of artistic films. Most of the award-winning films, such as Rain Man, Working Girl, Beetlejuice, and so on, were more commercial films. More than 10 years later, the Oscars had almost become a stage for mainstream films and extremely niche films. As long as an actor wanted to win an award, they would either play a great man or a patient. After more than 2 hours, most of the major awards had been given out. After the Best Cinematography Award, it was finally time for the Best Animated Short Film Award. Everyone knew that after this award was the heavyweight Best Actor Award, so they were all looking forward to the Best Animated Short Film Award. Perhaps feeling the anticipation of the guests, Carrie Fisher, who had participated in the Star Wars series, opened the envelope and read, "The winner of the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film is John Lasseter for Tin Soldiers." In the applause, Virginia looked at Eric again. After getting an encouraging look, she got up and walked to the stage. Carrie Fisher's list of winners was clearly for men, but a sexy woman in a royal blue dress was on stage. The audience in front of the TV couldn't help but ask questions. Who is this? What a beautiful woman. There's actually a woman named John. That's so strange. The organizer obviously had a plan. After Virginia walked on stage, the camera directly turned to Eric and gave him a big close-up. Eric secretly complained. He had no choice but to sit up straight and look forward without any expression, as if he didn't know that the camera was giving him a close-up. However, this kind of indifferent concealment didn't have much effect. In addition, the surrounding guests all looked at Eric with a playful smile after Virginia walked onto the stage, making him even more unable to get away with it. The audience in front of the TV, who paid a little attention to the gossip, quickly remembered Virginia's identity. This beauty was said to be the female lead of a movie written by Eric himself. In a New York Manhattan apartment, Jennifer Aniston curled up on the sofa and hugged a stuffed bear. She stared at the TV screen the whole night without moving, hoping to see her boyfriend again. She even hoped that the guests would tease her a little more. However, every time she saw Eric, she couldn't help but look at Virginia sitting next to Eric, and the stuffed bear in her hands would be destroyed. When she saw the scene of Virginia coming on stage to receive the award, Jennifer Aniston couldn't help it anymore. She curled her lips as if she was tearing a woman's hair. At the same time, the poor stuffed bear in her arms lost another tuft of fur. "No, I have to go back tomorrow," Jennifer Aniston vented, and no longer cared about the next award. She rushed into the bedroom and began to pack her luggage. At the same time, she remembered her father's words. If she really cared about this relationship, it was best to stay by his side. No sincere feelings could withstand the erosion of distance. And if she felt that she couldn't keep it, then she should give up early to avoid more pain. "I don't want to give up. Why should I give him up for those little bitches?" Muttering non-stop, the little girl neatly packed up a large pile of clothes. Finally, she found the key to Eric's mansion and stuffed it into her bag. Then she picked up the phone and dialed the airline's booking number. Almost at the same time that Virginia stepped on the podium, Jennifer Connelly was in a hotel in the Italian capital of Europe. She also saw the scene through cable TV. After rejecting Eric that night, she had no choice but to return to Europe and take the initiative to reshoot some scenes in Death of a Swan. Just as her agent had said, she had just given up an important opportunity. She could not afford to cut off her connections in Europe. It was precisely because she had played the role of Deborah in the famous Italian director Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America, at the age of 13, that she had gained recognition in the Italian film industry. Now, this was the only connection she had available. Connelly had also noticed that her manager had become much colder towards her. Lester had been focusing more on the other artists under his management and was paying less and less attention to Connelly. Even this trip to Rome, her agent didn't come with her. For the decision she made a few days ago, every time Connelly thought about it, she would accumulate a layer of regret. After the close-up of Eric sitting upright appeared on the TV, Connelly couldn't help but take the lady's handbag next to her, took out the phone, and looked again at the string of numbers that had been deeply imprinted in her mind. Is it still useful to call him now? Connolly stared at the phone in her hand and said to herself without confidence. Although far away in Rome, Connolly still learned that all the roles in Dark War had been confirmed through sporadic news in the newspaper. Although except for the 2 male leads, the list of the other actors had not been exposed, she knew that she definitely wouldn't be part of it. Even if she called now, Eric wouldn't replace someone else with her. Connolly felt that Eric was not the boss of those movie giants, and the film projects in his hands were very limited. It was impossible for there to be a suitable role for her at any time, so she wouldn't gain anything by calling. Virginia was already satisfied to be able to step onto the podium and show her face. The girl didn't do anything unexpected. She obediently took the Golden Man, took out the award speech that Eric had given her in advance, and read it. Then, she followed the guest backstage. Dustin Hoffman, who had a wonderful performance in Rain Man, won the Best Actor award. Then there were 2 technical awards. When the Best Director award was about to be presented, Virginia returned to her seat with the Oscar. Her face was flushed, and coupled with the mature charm she exuded, several men around her couldn't help but turn their eyes to the girl. At the same time, they secretly envied Eric's luck with women. Although it wasn't the time to talk, Virginia still looked at Eric affectionately, and her gratitude was beyond words. After Rain Man won the Best Picture award, the 3-hour award ceremony finally ended, and then it was time for the party. The famous Oscar vanity party would only appear a few years later, but that didn't mean that the stars would go home after the Oscars. There were countless celebration parties, and most of the guests could find a place to go as long as they were willing. Home Alone didn't win a single award, so of course there wouldn't be a celebration party. After leaving, although Runkle and his wife, who were passionate about this industry, wanted to take little Stu to some parties to familiarize himself with him, it was a pity that the little guy had sat in the award hall for 3 hours and was now so tired that he was sleepy. Of course, he could also be pretending. The Runkle couple could only take their son home in disappointment. Because there were a lot of people, Virginia didn't hold Eric's arm. She waited for Eric to finish greeting the acquaintances around him before she leaned over and asked, "Where are we going next, Eric?" Eric took the golden statuette that Virginia carefully held in her hand and played with it. He said, "What do you think? I just received a few party invitations. The cast of Rain Man, the cast of Working Girl, Warner Brothers, Disney, and the others. Oh, Amy said that Columbia would also hold a party." Virginia thought for a moment and said uncertainly, "How about Rain Man?" Eric snapped his fingers. "I think so too. The party for Rain Man is at the Sunset Tower Hotel in Beverly Hills. After the party, we don't have to go as far as the Hilton Hotel to go home." After making the decision, the 2 of them found Capel Sid and drove to the Sunset Tower Hotel together. As the big winner of this year's Oscars, the celebration party for Rain Man was undoubtedly the grandest. Eric's arrival was also welcomed by Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman, and a group of directors and producers. After walking through the crowd and chatting with people he knew and didn't know, Cruise suddenly pulled Eric aside and said to Virginia, who had been holding Eric's arm, "Miss Madsen, I want to talk to Eric alone." After entering the party for so long, Virginia had been sticking to Eric. In fact, she had some thoughts in her heart. She had hooked up with Eric at the party, so she definitely didn't want other women to do the same. Now that Cruise had personally spoken, although Virginia was dissatisfied, she could only nod and leave. "Eric, about Dark War. I have a new idea. Do you think we can shoot it like this?" Cruise drove Virginia away without any psychological pressure and began to tell Eric his new idea for the plot of Dark War. Eric listened carefully to Cruise's long speech and patiently waited for him to finish before he had the time to summarize all of Cruise's points. The conclusion was, more scenes. Chapter 126. Shaking his head slightly, Eric explained, "Tom, the reason why Dark War is called Dark War is because its core is the confrontation between the 2 protagonists. If the scenes are too unbalanced, the excitement of the movie will be greatly reduced. Moreover, I think you have the most room to play in this movie. Hank still needs to share scenes with Joe Pesci and others, and your role is completely a one-man show." There is no need to add more. Hearing Eric's rejection, although Cruise knew that what Eric said was very reasonable, he still showed a faint displeasure on his face. Originally, Eric did not have much opinion on Cruise's personal character. He was not even interested in those rumors at all. Everyone had their own way of living. There were many celebrities in Hollywood in private. At least Cruise was a very dedicated and diligent person, which was the original intention of Eric to cooperate with him. But now, Eric began to regret it, because Cruise was too controlling, and Eric himself was also a person with a strong desire for control. During the filming of Dark War, there would be a lot of disputes. Thinking about it carefully, Eric felt that the main reason was that he was too inexperienced, and Cruise had a sense of superiority from the bottom of his heart. So, Eric, about the bus girl, is Brooke Sella too tall? Cruise's height of more than 1.7 meters had always been his weakness. Therefore, after being rejected, Cruise impulsively said this sentence in order to pick on Brooke. He regretted it. It was like slapping his own face. Thinking of Brooke Sella's 6 foot, 183 centimeters, height, Eric's mouth could not help but twitch. If she wore high heels, she would probably be as tall as Gina Davis, who hugged him at the award ceremony today. Eric tried hard not to laugh in front of Cruise. He advised, "Tom, you don't have to worry about this at all. The two of you are sitting in the bus and in the restaurant. There are no scenes where you two walk side by side." "Okay," Cruise nodded awkwardly, took a sip of red wine to hide his embarrassment, and then hurried away. Just as Eric turned around and was about to return to the crowd, Virginia appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Eric's arm. "Hey, aren't you watching too closely?" Eric teased. How could he not see through Virginia's narrow-mindedness? The girl immediately revealed an aggrieved look and retracted her arm. "If you like any beauty, just go." "Forget it, let's go back." Eric looked at his watch. "Otherwise, you'll always be on tenterhooks, as if I'll fly away." "Yes." Virginia happily hugged Eric's arm again. "Can I go to your house tonight?" "Sure, but you're in the limelight tonight. There must be paparazzi waiting outside." Virginia had already come up with a plan. "We'll take the elevator to the parking lot and leave in Mr. Sid's car. We'll be fine if we're careful." If it weren't for the fact that they were in public, Eric really wanted to reach out and pinch the girl's face and praise her. As the two were about to leave, there was a commotion at the entrance of the banquet hall. Eric seemed to have heard someone calling out, "Mr. Spielberg." He looked up and saw a large group of people surrounding a middle-aged man with round glasses walking into the banquet hall. "It really is Steven Spielberg. What is he doing here?" Virginia asked curiously. "Who knows?" Eric shook his head and said, "Let's go up and say hello before we leave. Otherwise, it would be rude." "Yes." Virginia was obviously eager to give it a try. Just as the two of them were about to move forward, Spielberg walked towards Eric. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Spielberg took the initiative to reach out his hand to Eric. "Eric, I thought you would go to the Hilton Hotel. I didn't know you were here until I got there. It took me a long time to find you." "Really?" "I don't know what to say, Mr. Spielberg. If you want to see me, you can contact my agent to arrange a meeting." Eric shook hands with the other party in confusion. "Everyone is very busy, and today is a very special day, so I can spare some time," Spielberg explained. "Eric, I asked someone to find a room downstairs. Let's go there." "Oh, this lady can come too." "No problem." Eric nodded. Under the guessing gaze of everyone in the banquet hall, he pulled Virginia and left with Spielberg. After Eric left, everyone whispered to each other for a while, and then began to do their own things. Although they had lost a chance to get close to Spielberg, they didn't think they were qualified to do so. Cruise, on the other hand, was even more disappointed when he saw Spielberg, Eric, and the others disappear at the door. He originally thought that Spielberg came for the crew of Rain Man, or even for himself, but he didn't expect the result to be like this. Cruise wasn't too eager to cooperate with Spielberg. He just wanted to be friends with Spielberg. As the representative of Hollywood Jews, as long as he had a good relationship with Spielberg, It was equivalent to having a good relationship with the Jewish circle in Hollywood. Hollywood was the world of Jews. This sentence was not just for show. Barry Diller, Michael Eisner, and many other senior executives of film companies were Jewish. A large number of famous directors and stars such as Spielberg and Harrison Ford were also Jewish. Cruise left CAA. If he wanted to get rid of his identity as a pure actor and enter the ranks of producers, it was essential to make friends with the Jewish circle in Hollywood. In a room downstairs in the banquet hall, the two parties sat down. The waiter served them coffee and took the initiative to leave the room, leaving only Spielberg, his assistant, Eric, and Virginia. "Eric, is Drew okay? I haven't seen her visit me in a long time." Spielberg was not in a hurry to get down to business. Instead, he chatted casually. Eric was not in a hurry. He glanced at Virginia sitting upright next to him, which made him feel very embarrassed. "He's a big director, and I'm also a big director, okay? This little woman really makes me lose face. I have to teach her a lesson when I go back." "Drew is so heartless," Eric said with a smile. "She happens to be at home today. I'll go back and teach her a lesson. It's really rude of her not to visit you for a long time. I heard people say that the relationship between Drew and you is very strange, like a father and daughter. I didn't believe it at first, but after listening to your tone just now, I think it might be true. But it's a good choice for her to follow you. Her parents. Let's not talk about them. Eric, treat her well." "I will." Eric nodded. He did not delve into where Spielberg heard the news. Spielberg's connections in Hollywood were completely incomparable to his. Spielberg slowly took a sip of coffee and said, "Actually, I'm looking for you today because of the copyright of your book, Jurassic Park. I've asked people to contact you several times before, but they were all rejected, so I have to do it personally today. Eric, how about selling the film rights of Jurassic Park to me?" Eric did not answer immediately. He held the coffee cup and lowered his head as if he was thinking. In fact, he was very distressed. It was impossible to sell the film rights of Jurassic Park to Spielberg. Even if it was like in his previous life, Eric would not agree to let Spielberg be the director of this movie, because he just happened to remember some data in his mind. In his previous life, Jurassic Park took in more than $900 million at the box office worldwide, with $350 million in North America and $600 million overseas. According to the average split of 55% in North America and 20% overseas, the film could get $310 million at the box office. Universal Pictures had invested about $70 million in this movie, which meant that after deducting the production costs, the film could make a huge profit of $240 million. It seemed like an ecstatic number, because even in 1993 in his previous life, any movie giant's box office profit for a whole year was at most this number. Everything had a twist, which was called but. However, Spielberg was indeed known as the shrewdest movie businessman. As the director of Jurassic Park, Spielberg relied on his personal strength and a series of negotiations to sign a high-percentage contract with Universal. In the end, Spielberg personally took away $250 million from the Jurassic Park project. That's right, it was $10 million more than the box office profit of Jurassic Park. In 1993, the era of VCDs had not yet arrived. The videotape market only accounted for 30% to 40% of a movie's income, and the income from other broadcast rights was relatively lower. In other words, most of the profits from Jurassic Park were actually taken away by Spielberg himself, which led to the grand establishment of DreamWorks in 1994. If it weren't for the huge profits from Jurassic Park's related products and theme parks, Universal's executives would probably have to cover their faces and cry. As for the rumor that Universal's investment of Jurassic Park and Schindler's List caused Spielberg's dissatisfaction, which prompted Spielberg to go solo and set up DreamWorks, this was not credible at all. He didn't invest a penny and took away $250 million. If he was dissatisfied, there was no place in the world for him to talk about it. What Eric was now distressed was how to tactfully and peacefully reject Spielberg. He didn't want to offend this Jewish director who had huge connections in Hollywood. "Mr. Spielberg, actually, I wrote this book with the intention of being a director myself, so. Eric stuttered to organize his words. So. I didn't intend to sell the film and television rights of Jurassic Park. Spielberg smiled like an elder and analyzed Eric. Eric, I've seen a few of your movies, and I think you're better at low-budget comedies or dramas. I'm afraid you won't be able to make a sci-fi novel like Jurassic Park for a long time. I don't mean to look down on you, but you're still too young and lack the accumulation of experience. In fact, I'm the same. I made my first short film in 1959, but it wasn't until 16 years later that I was able to make a sci-fi film like Jaws. Although your qualifications are much better than mine, you still need about 10 years of experience. Maybe many people have already forgotten about the novel Jurassic Park by then. It's very risky to make a film again, and if you're not careful, you won't be able to recover the cost. Chapter 127. So, you still rejected it? In a car in the parking lot, Kapoor sat in the driver's seat and looked helplessly at Eric in the passenger's seat. Thinking of the scene just now, Eric sighed and nodded. Although Spielberg didn't show any displeasure when he left, he only regretfully said that if Liu Zhou changed his mind, Liu Zhou could contact him again. But Eric still knew that he had offended the famous Jewish director, which could be seen from the way Spielberg's assistant looked at him with an unappreciative look. If Spielberg had expressed his intention to buy the copyright through others in the past, Eric's refusal wouldn't have been a big deal. But this time, his refusal was much more serious. Spielberg had personally come forward. This was a very sincere gesture, and it was even equivalent to sending a favor to the door. If this deal was successful, not only would Eric receive a generous copyright transfer fee, but he would also gain Spielberg's favor. This relationship might be of great help to him in the future. But he couldn't give away an important chess piece in his future career for a favor, even if it was a very big favor. Jurassic Park involved a huge industry chain worth tens of billions of dollars. Although Eric never thought of monopolizing it, he at least wanted to ensure that he could get the most delicious piece of this big cake in the future. And once the copyright was sold, he would completely lose the leadership of this project. At most, he could only share some leftovers after others ate the meat and drank the wine. Eric, do you want to hear my suggestion? Kapoor asked. I know what you want to say. Contact Spielberg immediately and sell the movie rights to him, right? Kapoor, there's no room for negotiation. I won't sell it. Kapoor touched his bald head in distress and said, Eric, have you thought about your situation? You're completely in a state of fighting alone. You seem to be very familiar with the executives of those film companies, but it's completely based on pure interests. The reason why they're so good to you now is that your previous movies were all successful and brought them huge benefits. But no one will always succeed. Once you fail, it will be time for them to turn against you. Eric said confidently, I don't think I'll experience such a failure in the near future. I'm very confident in my movie. There are many reasons for failure, and it might even be man-made. Kapoor continued, Eric, think about it carefully. Compared to your strength, you're getting too much of a share. If it happened once, twice, or even 3 or 4 times, it would still be fine. They would only think that you were a lucky little guy. But if it continued, those big shots would do everything they could to suppress you, or even destroy you. Just like the lions on the grassland, they will allow the hyenas to nibble on their leftover food, but they will never allow a weak hyena to occupy more than a pride of lions. Eric opened his mouth, but he could not think of any words to refute. He knew what Kapoor meant by saying these words. In fact, Kapoor hoped that he could find some solid allies. That way, when he might be suppressed in the future, he would not be completely alone. Spielberg wanted to get the movie rights of Jurassic Park. This was an excellent opportunity to befriend him. Once he sold the rights, the screenwriter of the movie would definitely not be able to get rid of him. Spielberg also promised that Firefly could participate in the investment. All these provided the conditions for him to get in touch with Spielberg and establish a good personal relationship with him. But Eric was still unwilling to give up. Kapoor noticed the struggle and hesitation in Eric's expression, so he continued to persuade him, Eric, do you know which movie company your Firefly is most similar to? Eric looked up curiously. Kapoor did not sell out. It's most similar to United Artists. Back then, Chaplin and a few other famous directors founded United Artists. This company's position was simply a production company, and it specialized in providing excellent films to the other big shots. It's very similar to Firefly, which doesn't have any distribution channels now. In the end, all the movie giants with perfect distribution channels, except for the unlucky Thunderbolt, have all survived. But United Artists, which was once on par with the other big shots, has been reduced to a subsidiary of MGM. A big reason for this is that United Artists paid too much attention to the production business back then and neglected to expand their distribution channels. When Eric heard Kapoor's words, the DreamWorks he was most familiar with immediately popped up in his mind. It seemed that history was always shockingly similar. In his previous life, he would often see the phrase, "distribution channels are king," in some economic articles. It was indeed a wise saying. In his previous life, some of the better second-tier movie companies in Hollywood, such as Lionsgate and Mike Mirra, all started out in distribution. Spielberg's DreamWorks and the later new DreamWorks could only float between the big shots like Universal, Paramount, and Disney. Sometimes, for just 1% of the profits, they would bitterly quarrel until they broke up. And now, Firefly is even worse than United Artists. It has almost no distribution ability. It's too easy for those movie giants who monopolize most of the distribution channels to deal with you. So now, you really need some allies who can really help you at critical moments. Once a bad situation happens, there will be someone who can help you and pull the strings instead of being isolated and helpless. It's impossible for a hyena to be friends with a lion, but there is no barrier between the same species. In this situation, Spielberg has already sent himself to your door, and you still want to push him away. That's simply too unwise. If Eric was a native of this spacetime, after Kapoor's persuasion and threats, he would definitely obediently hand over Jurassic Park. Unfortunately, he was not. Okay, Kapoor, I understand. Eric nodded, looking as if he had been taught a lesson. Kapoor happily handed his mobile phone to Eric. Then hurry up and call Spielberg. Don't be afraid that he will think you're fickle. Eric, you're a young man. You have this privilege. Spielberg won't mind. Eric took the brick and patted it in his hand. Kapoor, I only said that I understand the importance of distribution channels to Firefly. I didn't say that I would sell the rights to Jurassic Park to Spielberg. Virginia, who had been sitting in the back seat quietly listening to their conversation, couldn't help but laugh out loud. She realized that she had lost her composure and hurriedly covered her mouth. Kapoor seemed to choke for a moment. He stared at Eric speechlessly with his eyes wide open. In the end, he took back his mobile phone in disappointment. Up to you. I've said all that I can say. Jeffrey is right. You're really a stubborn young man. Don't worry, Kapoor. I have my own plans. Think about it. I'm a British American. I still have British citizenship. So, even if I have a good relationship with Spielberg, I'm destined to never enter the Jewish circle. It wasn't that Eric hadn't considered these things. Among the few movies that Firefly had this year, his next 3 movies had already been settled. One would be for Columbia, and the other 2 would be for Fox according to the previous contract. Although the distributors for the other 3 movies hadn't been confirmed, he had already received a lot of offers from the Big Six. As long as he was willing, he could sign the distribution contract at any time. If all of these movies could sell like they did in his previous life, then he could accumulate a large amount of initial funds. Even if 1 or 2 of the movies didn't do well at the box office due to the butterfly effect, it wouldn't hurt him at all. At most, he would earn a little less. After all, other than the $40 million Dark War from Columbia, the investments for the other movies were all less than $10 million. Even if only one of them sold like it did in his previous life, he could recoup all of his investment and make a profit. After this year, just as Kapoor said, the big shots would definitely realize that he had taken too much. They would try their best to suppress him and squeeze out the benefits that he deserved. But by then, he would already have enough initial accumulation, so he wouldn't be helpless against them. Not to mention whether the Big Six would really band together to suppress him. Even if there was less than a 1% chance of that happening, he would just have to slowly build up his strength. Moreover, Eric didn't believe that the big shots would agree to deal with him for a long time when he had the ability to bring huge benefits to them. There were too many people and they weren't of one mind. Even 3 monks might not have water to drink, let alone 6. Kapoor, let's call it a night. Lend me your car. You can go and drive mine. Kapoor looked at the girl sitting in the back seat and shook his head. No, Eric, you can't just borrow a car. Besides, you drank. I'll send you home. Kapoor, don't be so serious. Don't think that you can be a light bulb just because you shaved your head. Eric ridiculed. Virginia, who was sitting in the back seat, had already lowered her head shyly. Kapoor laughed and said, You've misunderstood. I'm not that insensible. What I meant was that I'll send you back. I only drank a few sips of champagne. More importantly, I'm very experienced when it comes to getting rid of paparazzi. Back then, it was precisely because of this skill that I managed to get my first employer. I don't want to have to deal with PR for the 2 of you again tomorrow morning. Eric, Beverly Hills or Malibu? My home. Malibu is too far away. Okay, then you sit in the back seat. You might be photographed in the front. Eric obediently moved to the back seat. Kapoor started the car and left the underground parking lot. Just as they drove onto the road, a few cars clearly followed them. After a while, Kapoor looked at the rearview mirror and laughed. A total of 3 paparazzi cars are following us. Fortunately, there are many targets at the party. Otherwise, there might be a long tail. Chapter 128. Eric curiously turned his head and looked behind for a while. There are only 2 cars. The silver Honda and the black one. That's a Chrysler, right? Heh, so, if I let you drive my car away just now, you'll have to wait for tomorrow's newspaper to read carefully. You mean? Eric looked for a while and finally saw a black car that appeared and disappeared. That black Mercedes-Benz. A paparazzi driving a Mercedes-Benz. That's too extravagant. That's the one. Kapoor smiled and answered. Then, he asked curiously, Is a Mercedes-Benz very extravagant? I think that car is at most $30,000. I remembered wrongly. Eric was a little embarrassed. When he saw the Mercedes-Benz, he subconsciously thought of luxury cars that cost more than $1 million. In his previous life, he could only afford to drive a Volkswagen. Kapoor did not ask any more questions. He skillfully turned down Sunset Boulevard and shuttled through the bustling streets of Los Angeles in the middle of the night. The twists and turns almost made Eric dizzy. When he finally reacted, the car had already appeared on Sunset Boulevard. All done. Now, I just hope that there are no paparazzi blocking your door. Kapoor, my house has a back door. Kapoor looked at Eric through the rearview mirror and gave him a look of disdain. While Virginia chuckled, Eric raised his hand. Okay, I won't say anything. The car stopped in front of Eric's mansion. Eric and Virginia did not show their faces. Kapoor took Eric's keys and opened the door. He directly drove the car into the courtyard. There are paparazzi cars parked about 10 meters to the east and west of the door. Eric, when Virginia leaves tomorrow, you better be careful. Don't let any photos be taken. Don't worry, I know what to do. Eric held Virginia's small hand. Kapoor, do you want to come in and sit for a while? Kapoor shrugged. Although I don't want to be a third wheel, I have to stay here for at least 10 minutes before leaving. Otherwise, I shouldn't have driven the car in just now. Understood. Come in and have a cup of coffee. The 3 of them walked towards the villa together. There was light in the living room. Eric explained, Drew will be at home for the next 2 days. The girl had asked for leave to come back because of the Oscars. She had thought that Eric would walk her on the red carpet, but it turned out to be Virginia. Therefore, the girl had been throwing a tantrum from time to time. He pushed open the door and walked into the living room. The volume of the television was very low, and there was a petite body curled up on the sofa. Eric walked forward and gently pushed Drew, who was hugging a pillow. "Drew, wake up. Go upstairs and sleep." After a few pushes, the girl finally reacted. She mumbled in a daze, "Oh, Eric, don't play with me. I'm so sleepy." Eric guiltily looked at the two petrified people behind him. "Well, I swear I didn't do anything out of line." This explanation was weak and feeble, and Kapoor and Virginia clearly did not believe it. "That's too hasty," Virginia muttered. "Don't forget about safety measures." Kapoor was indeed a professional agent who thought for his employer. Faced with the two people who did not believe his explanation at all, Eric's shoulders slumped in despair. "Okay, I won't explain. Why should I explain to you? Vicky, the coffee is in the kitchen. You entertain Kapoor. I'll send the girl to the bedroom." After Eric finished speaking, he pulled a pillow out of Drew's arms and carried the girl to the stairs. When they arrived at Drew's bedroom, he placed the girl on the bed and carefully covered her with a blanket. Only then did he close the door and leave. The moment the door closed, Drew immediately opened his eyes and looked at the door with sparkling eyes. He cheered silently and kicked the thin blanket on his body high up into the air before rolling around crazily. "Haha, this is what you get for not taking me to the Oscars." Click, the bedroom door was suddenly pushed open again. Eric crossed his arms and leaned against the door frame. "I knew you did it on purpose, little girl. Aren't you afraid that I'll be sent to prison and you'll have to sleep on the streets from now on?" The girl was caught red-handed in her prank. She was stunned for a second before she immediately climbed to the edge of the bed and pulled back the blanket that had fallen to the ground. She quickly covered herself and said in a muffled voice, "I'm really going to sleep this time. Drew, Virginia will be spending the night here tonight. Don't cause trouble." The thin blanket was pulled down, revealing her sparkling eyes. "Can I watch from the side? It's NC-17. Teenagers under the age of 18 are not allowed to watch." "I can secretly watch." Eric's tone became heavier. "Drew, I'm serious." Okay. "I won't watch," Drew said as she pulled the blanket over her little head again. She even deliberately turned her back to Eric like a little wife who was angry with her husband. Eric looked at the girl's actions speechlessly. After a while, he closed the bedroom door again and walked away. For some reason, she woke up exceptionally early today. Well, it was actually not early. It was already 9 o'clock. However, compared to Drew, who often slept until noon, this time was indeed quite early. She put on her clothes and looked at the mirror while brushing her teeth. Dark circles. It's all those two despicable guys' fault. She brushed her teeth angrily and walked out of the bedroom. The villa was quiet. The other two obviously did not get up. Perhaps they really did play too late last night. Cheating couple. Humph. She wanted to rush to Eric's door and wake them up, but after thinking about it, she decided against it. It was rare for her to sleep in. How could she not sleep in at such a young age? She walked downstairs in her furry slippers and minded her own business. She cooked a small pot of oatmeal with milk and took a small spoonful. She blew on it and tasted it. It was a little sweet, but it was passable. She filled a small bowl for herself, took out bread from the spinneret, and carried it to the dining room. She stuffed a few mouthfuls of bread with sauce, and her cheeks were stuffed. She held the small bowl and sipped the oatmeal in small mouthfuls. There seemed to be a sound from the living room door. A sound. The girl almost forgot to put down the oatmeal. She held the small bowl and walked out of the dining room. The travel-worn Jennifer Aniston was pulling a red suitcase and looking around. When she saw Drew appear at the dining room door, her originally interested expression quickly faded. "Where's Eric?" Jennifer Aniston asked matter-of-factly. Her tone was like the mistress of the house asking her maid. If it was any other time, Drew would definitely retort, but now, the girl held the small bowl with one hand to cover her face. She looked at Jennifer Aniston with sparkling eyes. She stretched out her small arm exaggeratedly and pointed upstairs. she said considerately. Turn left upstairs, it's the second room on the south side. Jennifer Aniston keenly sensed that something was wrong. She suspiciously glanced at Drew, but still put down the suitcase in her hand and walked towards the stairs. The girl held the bowl to cover her small mouth that was about to split open. Her eyes followed Jennifer Aniston's figure until the other party disappeared around the corner of the stairs. Only then did she lightly jump twice in schadenfreude. She tiptoed and made a beautiful circle on the spot. Eric, you can't blame me this time. Chapter 129. The girl hurried back to the dining room, grabbed a piece of bread, and prepared to watch the show while eating breakfast. After some consideration, she chose a safer location, the entrance of the dining room. In less than a minute, Drew craned her neck in anticipation. Sure enough, there were a few sounds of quarreling coming from upstairs. Eric Williams, I'll never forgive you, you bastard, you big bastard. In the midst of these voices, Jennifer Aniston rushed down the stairs to the second floor. She glared fiercely at Drew, who was watching the show, and was about to leave with her suitcase. Jenny, wait for me, don't be impulsive. Eric's voice sounded, and then a figure wearing only a pair of trousers appeared at the corner of the V-shaped staircase. Seeing that Jennifer Aniston was about to leave again with her suitcase, Eric did not pay attention to his feet in his anxiety. He missed a step and rolled down the stairs. Wow! Drew opened her mouth wide. Seeing that Eric was rolling down the stairs, she was not too worried. Instead, she was gloating because this flight of stairs was less than 2 meters high. And when Jennifer Aniston saw this scene, she felt relieved and scolded that he deserved it. Unfortunately, things seemed to be a little unexpected. Eric rolled down the stairs and directly fell to the ground. Then, blood began to flow from his forehead and his whole body was motionless. The atmosphere was stagnant for a moment. With a bang, the porcelain bowl of oatmeal fell to the ground and shattered. The girl rushed up with a look of horror. Eric, are you okay? Hey, say something, you. Don't scare me. Drew rushed to Eric's side and called out his name while wiping the blood from his forehead. However, she found that the more she wiped, the more blood there was. It directly dyed the sleeves of the girl's pajamas red. After careful inspection, she found that there was a wound of about 1 centimeter on his forehead. Blood was flowing from the wound, and Eric had fainted. Jennifer Aniston was about to leave angrily, but when she saw this scene, she hesitated for a moment, put down her suitcase, and walked over. Passing by Drew's body, he panicked when he saw the blood flowing out of Eric's forehead. How could this be? Helplessly, the girl held Eric's head in her arms and awkwardly pressed on the wound on Eric's forehead. Her pajamas were stained with blood, and her eyes were as red as a rabbit's. She raised her head and shouted at Jennifer Aniston, B*TSH, call the ambulance. If anything happens to Eric, I swear I'll kill you. Jennifer Aniston was scared out of her wits by Drew's hysterical threat. She rushed to the phone and hurriedly dialed 911. At this moment, Virginia, who had hurriedly put on her clothes, came downstairs and saw this scene. She hurriedly rushed over. Drew, let me do it, I'll do it. Go away, you B*cheese, it's all your fault. Otherwise, Eric wouldn't be injured. You B*cheese, B*cheese. Although Virginia was very upset to be insulted by Drew, she was a mature woman after all. She knew that now was not the time to be calculative. Drew, it's not easy to stop the bleeding like this. Is there a first aid kit? Tell me where the first aid kit is. In Eric's bedroom, on the wardrobe, Drew said without hesitation. Virginia hurriedly got up and ran upstairs. It seems we should lay him flat on the ground. Jennifer Aniston, who had finished the call, came over again. Seeing Drew kneeling on the floor and holding Eric in her arms, she couldn't help but suggest based on some of her specious medical knowledge. Drew coldly glanced at Jennifer Aniston. She carefully pressed the wound on Eric's forehead and laid Eric flat on the floor. After thinking for a while, she took off one of her cartoon slippers and placed it on the back of Eric's head. Jennifer Aniston looked at Drew and unconsciously felt a little sour in her heart. She was Eric's real girlfriend, right? Why did it seem like she was the third party in this scene? Looking at Drew, who was now like a crazy female leopard, Jennifer Aniston instinctively felt a little scared. It was as if she would be eaten alive if she got a little closer. Virginia quickly came back with a first aid kit. Drew, let me do it. I've learned some first aid. Drew silently stepped back a little. Seeing Virginia skillfully stop the bleeding and bandage Eric's wound, she felt a little relieved. She glanced at Jennifer Aniston, who was standing next to her. Didn't you say you were leaving? Now you can get lost. Don't come looking for Eric in the future. Jennifer Aniston finally got angry. I'm Eric's girlfriend. Who are you to order me around? You're just a pet he keeps. Drew sneered. So what if I'm a pet? At least I won't be stubborn and stupid like you, who only knows how to throw a tantrum in front of him all day long. You're the idiot, Jennifer Aniston retorted frantically. She pointed at Virginia. I'm his girlfriend. Shouldn't I be angry with him? He's such an excellent man. What's wrong with him playing with a few women? You. Jennifer Aniston was rendered speechless by Drew's strong logic. Virginia carefully bandaged the wound on Eric's forehead and touched Eric's chest to feel his heartbeat. Only then did she feel a little relieved. Listening to the two girls' illogical argument, she was distressed and was about to stop them when the doorbell rang. The ambulance is here, Jennifer Aniston said softly. Drew immediately forgot about the argument and rushed out to open the door. Virginia waited until the ambulance arrived in front of the villa before she got up and hid upstairs. She didn't want outsiders to find out that she was here. After all, she and Eric didn't have a relationship that could be seen in public. Jennifer Aniston saw Virginia's actions and subconsciously wanted to hide upstairs. However, she caught a glimpse of Drew's figure waving her small hands as she hurriedly explained something to the approaching medical staff. She stopped in her tracks. The medical staff gave Eric a simple treatment again before carrying the still unconscious Eric into the ambulance. Jennifer Aniston saw Drew get into the ambulance and couldn't help but go up. The ambulance drove out of Eric's mansion and roared all the way to the nearest hospital. The paparazzi who were waiting in front of Eric's house were overjoyed when they saw this scene. They keenly sensed that something big must have happened and immediately started the car to follow the ambulance. In less than an hour, the news of Eric being injured and hospitalized in a coma spread throughout the news media in Los Angeles. According to news from our station, the young director Eric Williams accidentally fell down the stairs this morning and is still unconscious. This is a live report from our reporter at Beverly Hills Cormier Surgical Hospital. The television screen switched to an outdoor shot. In front of a hospital, there were 40 to 50 reporters from various media. The bustling crowd almost completely blocked the entrance of the hospital. The scene happened to show Al Pacino wearing sunglasses and a serious face as he got out of the business car and was quickly surrounded by a large group of reporters for an interview. A young blonde female reporter stood in front of the camera and said with a microphone, "Eric has been in a coma for 3 hours." According to the information revealed so far, Eric Williams' back, elbows, and knees have different degrees of contusions, but the most serious is the violent impact on the head, which caused a lot of blood loss. At present, it is not certain whether this injury will lead to more serious consequences. As we all know, brain trauma is the most unpredictable kind of injury. Inside the hospital, Jeffrey and Kapoor were the first to arrive, followed by Al Pacino, Tom Hanks, and other actors who were close to Eric. The two directors of Island Horror and Smell a Woman also rushed over one after another. After a series of examinations, Eric was sent to the ward. Everyone gathered in the office to listen to Eric's doctor's analysis of his condition. The results of the CT and MRI examination show that Mr. Williams's head has no symptoms of skull fracture or internal bleeding, so there is no need to worry too much at present. Dr. Duncan, when will he wake up? Drew, who was standing at the front of the crowd, asked anxiously. Dr. Duncan hesitated for a moment and said, "He should wake up in 8 hours." "Why should, Doctor? Can't you be sure?" Dr. Duncan nodded truthfully. "How can this be? You're a doctor. How can you not be sure? Aren't you the best doctor here?" Drew was so excited that she almost rushed over, but Jeffrey stopped her. Drew, don't be so polite. Dr. Duncan looked at Drew's sorry appearance with one foot bare and her pajamas stained with blood. He did not mind the girl's rudeness. Instead, he patiently explained, Miss Barrymore, with Mr. Williams's injury, according to past experience, he should have woken up by now. However, he did not wake up according to common sense, so I can't give you an accurate answer. You still need to wait and observe patiently. Drew waved her hand in annoyance. No, I want to transfer to another hospital. I want to go to the best hospital in Los Angeles. Jeffrey pressed Drew's shoulder and said softly, Drew, stop fooling around. This is already the best brain hospital in Los Angeles. Dr. Duncan added, Perhaps, at this time, you can try to talk into the patient's ear. Perhaps it can wake him up. After hearing this suggestion, Drew immediately turned and ran to Eric's ward. After the girl disappeared, Jeffrey asked, Doctor, will this method really work? Dr. Duncan smiled bitterly. I just want to find something for Barrymore to do. Her emotions are too unstable. She might break down. There was a moment of silence. Nobody said anything. The group left the office and came to Eric's ward. They saw Drew leaning against Eric's ear and mumbling something nervously. They did not go over and could only stand outside the corridor. A few passers-by saw celebrities like Al Pacino and Tom Hanks appear and were eager to go over. However, when they saw the cold expressions of the group, they tactfully retreated. Jeffrey, who was the oldest, finally said, Why don't you all go back first? It's useless to stay here. Caper and I will stay here. After hearing this, everyone left. In the end, only Jeffrey, Caper, and the stubborn Jennifer Aniston were left. She also wanted to go to Eric's bedside. However, when she saw Drew's crazy appearance, she was a little scared. 8 hours later, Eric still did not wake up. Even until this evening, there were still no signs of Eric waking up. Drew went crazy again and transferred his worry and anger to Jennifer Aniston. Jeffrey and Caper pulled the girl's neck away. Jennifer Aniston also began to regret it. She even forgot to resist when Drew pounced on her. At night, many people finally could not sit still. Fox's Barry Diller and Columbia's Amy Pascal appeared at the hospital one after another. A large group of reporters, who were still blocking the hospital entrance, excitedly wanted to surround the two for an interview. However, they were pushed away by the strong bodyguards. The two first went to the ward to visit Eric. Then, as usual, they asked the attending doctor about Eric's condition. After listening to Duncan's explanation, Barry Diller asked the question that everyone wanted to ask the most but did not dare to ask, Doctor, is there a possibility that he is in a vegetative state? Duncan held the pen in his hand and rubbed it twice. He hesitated and said, The probability is very small, but it is not impossible. Fortunately, Drew was still guarding Eric's bedside. If he heard this sentence, who knew what kind of madness he would go? Jeffrey and the others looked at each other. They did not know what to say. Barry Diller and Amy Pascal looked even more worried. They were not sad for Eric, but they were worried for Fox and Columbia. Both companies now had Eric's movie contracts. If Eric's next movie project was aborted, after an hour of fruitless discussion, Barry Diller and Amy Pascal had to leave. Perhaps everyone was alarmed by Eric. The next morning, at 4 o'clock in the morning, Eric, who had been in a coma for nearly 19 hours, finally woke up. After the doctor's examination, Drew, whose eyes were red and whose hair was messy, held Eric's big hand and affectionately rubbed it on his face for a while. Then, he fell asleep on the edge of the bed. Jeffrey and Kapoor, who had stayed up all night, sat by Eric's bedside with relief. Seeing Drew's reaction, Kapoor stood up and said, Eric, shall I carry Drew to the next room to sleep? No, here is fine, Eric said. He pulled the girl up and laid her down beside him. Then, he said to Jennifer Aniston, who was standing at the door with her hands behind her back, Jenny, come here. Jennifer Aniston obediently came over. Eric, since you're awake, I'll leave first. Eric reached out and grabbed Jennifer Aniston. Don't go, Jenny. Kapoor and Jeffrey stood up and walked out. Let's call the others and inform them that you're awake. They must still be worried. The sooner they hear the news, the better. After the door closed, Jennifer Aniston relaxed a little and sat down beside Eric's bed. Eric strangely touched the 2 red marks on Jennifer Aniston's neck. This is... Jennifer Aniston glanced at Drew, who was lying beside Eric. Her gaze was complicated. You bastard. If you don't wake up, Drew will kill me. She won't. Eric's hand moved up and touched Jennifer Aniston's face. No, she definitely will. Jennifer Aniston pulled Eric's hand down. I think we should break up. Maybe Drew is more suitable for you. I only treat Drew as a sister. Jennifer Aniston didn't pursue the matter. Instead she said, but I really can't stand your fickleness, Eric. When I saw the news about you in New York, I could still pretend to comfort myself that it was all made up by the tabloids. But after what I saw yesterday morning, I can't lie to myself anymore. It's all true. I really can't stand it anymore. So, can you let me go? Eric tightened his grip on Jennifer Aniston's small hand. Forget it, Jenny. Let's not talk about this first. I'm planning to produce a TV series recently. Do you want to be the female lead? I guarantee that this TV series will make you more popular than those movie stars. Jennifer Aniston pulled her small hand with all her might but couldn't pull it back. I really can't think of anyone more suitable than you. Jenny, you don't want me to go through another audition, do you? That way, many girls will appear by my side. You know, my willpower is always weak. Okay, then it's settled. Jennifer Aniston was stubborn, but Eric was even more domineering. Under Eric's endless pestering, Jennifer Aniston muddle-headedly agreed. When she reacted, the girl found herself lying on the other side of Eric. Like Drew, she didn't sleep all night, so she quickly fell asleep next to Eric. Although Eric had already woken up, maybe because Eric woke up too late, the newspaper had already been printed. Anyway, the next day, the news of Eric being in a coma for a long time appeared in the newspaper. Eric Williams was accidentally injured. The filming plan for Dark War will be postponed. Columbia is afraid of losing a heavyweight bargaining chip. According to internal information, Williams has been in a coma for a long time and may be in a vegetative state. If this situation is true, several movie contracts signed with Columbia and 20th Century Fox will be aborted. The future of Firefly, which has been developing well, will also be uncertain. A large number of these 2 types of news appeared in the newspaper, but after the news of Eric waking up was clarified by Fox in a timely manner, these sensational reports became nothing. Although it caused Columbia and Fox's stock prices to fall temporarily after the morning trading, it quickly stabilized with the clarification of the news. At the same time, some people also focused on other aspects. This kind of focus also attracted the attention of a large number of readers. For example, a piece of news in Los Angeles City News. As we all know, Eric Williams has no relatives at present. Although child star Drew Barrymore is close to Williams, the two are neither blood-related nor legally related. It is said that Eric Williams did not make any will before. Once Eric Williams has an accident, his huge assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars will be left without an heir, or face the possibility of being taken over by the federal government. In the ward, although Eric felt that he had fully recovered, under the doctor's advice and everyone's insistence, he had to continue to stay in the hospital for a few more days. Looking at the news in Los Angeles City News, Eric smiled and said to Drew next to him, "Maybe I really should make a will. Girl, how much do you want?" "Of course, all of it is mine." Drew flipped through a magazine in boredom and glanced up at Eric. "Have you forgotten what our relationship was in Back to 17? I thought you would say that I don't want a penny, as long as you are well. You actually want all of my assets. That really makes me sad." While Eric was bored in the ward and thinking about whether to make a will, the British paparazzi thousands of miles away discovered another thing. Eric's father was indeed dead, but the identity of his mother was a mystery. This discovery made many paparazzi ecstatic. If they could find the whereabouts of Eric Williams' mother, it would definitely be explosive news. As the birthplace of paparazzi, the British paparazzi were really good at digging. They quickly found Eric's childhood home in London, and then visited the neighbors near Eric's home one by one. Sure enough, they found some clues. She is a very elegant woman. Even when she goes out, she always wears a veil. I have never seen her real face. She is probably a rich lady, but she disappeared after giving birth to the child. Ralph is really lucky. After a Herculean effort, the British tabloids only found these bits and pieces of information. In other words, no one remembered what Eric Williams' mother looked like at all. This gave the tabloids more room to speculate. They all agreed that this might be a fairy tale about a princess falling in love with a groom. Although the ending was not good, she was single and had an outstanding son. These fabricated news quickly spread to the United States. Eric was not surprised to see these, but he was relieved. It was best if they could not find it. If there was really a mother he had never met before, he really did not know how to deal with it. It was best to keep this mystery forever. After April Fool's Day, Eric left the hospital successfully after another detailed examination. This storm was completely over. The preparations for Dark War were all ready. In the remaining days, Eric had already started to work with Cruise and Hanks, waiting for the official shooting of the movie on April 5th. Chapter 130. Du Chifeng was one of the few Hong Kong film directors that Eric liked. White Pigeon Wu had developed his own set of violent aesthetics because of the success of Hero itself, while Du Chifeng had developed his own mature and distinctive personal style after dozens of films. His films had a dark philosophy that combined elements such as coldness, violence, fatalism, and sadness. Dark War was one of the few films in Du Chifeng's works that had a sense of carefreeness amidst the sadness. If one were to evaluate this movie from the perspective of an ordinary audience, the word that would appear the most would be one word: cool. That was the main reason why Eric chose this film. At the same time, it was also a bold attempt by Eric. He wanted to see if such a film that didn't exist in Hollywood history would be successful. In his memory, many of the blockbuster Hollywood films in the next 10 years had already been copyrighted. It was very difficult for Eric to snatch food from the tigers' mouths, especially after others knew that he was optimistic about a film. There weren't many blockbuster movies that didn't have copyrights. At the current pace, it might be finished in 2 or 3 years. Of course, this was also a very safe attempt. First of all, the story of Dark War was very exciting, and it was approved by the two big names, Cruise and Hanks, which meant that the story didn't have a difference in taste between the East and the West. Secondly, the two male leads that Eric used were now very guaranteed at the box office. Tom Cruise had just experienced the success of Rain Man, and his popularity had once again reached a small peak. Tom Hanks had just been nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor with last year's Flying Across the Future. Coupled with the box office appeal accumulated by Eric's own previous films, and the cool script, according to the analysis of Columbia's data department, it was very easy for this film to win $100 million in the summer. On April 5th, in a large studio of Columbia Pictures, Dark War officially started shooting. The first thing to shoot was a series of indoor scenes. This time, Eric didn't plan to shoot in chronological order like Wind and Moon. The images of the two protagonists in Dark War were very distinct. There was no change from the beginning to the end. One was smart and capable, while the other was evil and wise. As long as they could get into character smoothly, no matter which scene they started from, there wouldn't be too much of a problem. Therefore, Eric decided to go from simple to complicated, from the inside to the outside of the shooting process. In the ward, after Andy, played by Cruise, learned that his condition had worsened, he still got up from the bed and slowly put on his clothes. How much longer? 4 weeks. If you have internal bleeding, you can die at any time. The spirited doctor sat behind the desk and replied with a hoarse voice. Andy didn't stop putting on his clothes despite hearing the bad news. After putting on his belt, he handed a dozen bills to the doctor. "Don't worry, just give me 4 weeks' worth of painkillers." After taking the painkillers, Andy put on his coat and prepared to leave. The doctor sighed and said, "I don't think we'll meet again." "In this lifetime," Andy replied calmly. Cut. After the scene was finished, Eric called for a pause. He didn't say, "good" or "no good." Sitting behind the monitor, he frowned slightly as if he was thinking about something. Although Eric had been discharged from the hospital, his head was still wrapped in bandages. Occasionally, he would have headaches. However, after repeated examinations, no problems were found, so Eric was no longer nervous. There was nothing special about this part of Cruz's performance. With his acting skills, he could easily complete it. In the post-production, this part of the scene would be combined with the scene of Andy on the rooftop. They would use a montage technique to mix and edit it. Moreover, they would also use fast and slow shots. In just 2 short scenes, there would be 2 fast and slow shots. The reason why this was done, and the tense dubbing with the ticking of the second hand, was to give the audience a subtle hint of the passing of time. Andy only had 4 weeks left to live, and after a few short scenes, it would arouse the nervousness and curiosity of the audience. What would he do in the remaining 4 weeks? The staff present were all old crew members who had worked with Eric several times, so they had seen Eric fall into deep thought more than once during the shooting process. Therefore, they tacitly agreed not to disturb him. They quietly arranged the equipment and patiently waited for Eric to come back to his senses. However, after waiting for a minute, Cruz finally became impatient. He felt that there was nothing wrong with his performance just now. If it worked, he would pass. If it didn't work, Cruz didn't mind repeating it a few more times. What was going on now? "Hey, Eric, how was the scene just now? Do you want to do it again?" Cruz finally couldn't help but walk up to Eric and gently nudge him. Eric suddenly felt a figure appear beside him. Because they were in the studio, all the lights were artificial. When Cruz appeared beside Eric, he just happened to block a light behind Eric, forming a faint shadow in front of him. A shadow. Eric suddenly looked up and saw Cruz's expression. He explained, "Sorry, Tom, I was thinking about something and got distracted." "It's okay." Cruz showed a generous smile. "How was the scene just now? Do you want to do it again?" "I'm afraid we have to do it again," Eric replied. "Can you wait a moment?" Cruz shrugged and stepped back. He watched as Eric called over the lighting technician. Then the lights in the studio began to be dimmed slowly. It was no longer the scene that simulated sunlight. Eric stared at the monitor and waited until the lights were adjusted to his satisfaction. Then, he asked the lighting technician to stop. "Okay, everyone, get ready. We'll do the scene just now again," Eric ordered loudly. After a while, the set keeper walked up and put down the board. The shooting started again. Eric stared at the scene of Andy and the doctor on the monitor seriously. He secretly compared this scene with the scene on the rooftop in his mind. This scene was used to illustrate Andy's current situation in the movie. It was very similar to Andy's memories on the rooftop. After watching this scene, the audience might even have the misconception that Andy wanted to jump off the building. They might even think that this was a flashback movie where Andy used 4 weeks to complete all his wishes. Then, with nothing left to live for, he climbed onto the rooftop of the building and jumped off in one fell swoop. Since it was used to explain and recall memories, Eric felt that the lighting in the original version was too bright. It was exactly the same as Andy's scene on the sunny rooftop. It didn't give the audience any sense of difference. Therefore, the effect of the expression was much worse. Eric didn't want to complain. The use of lighting in to Chiefing's movie was just like White Dove Wu's 3 axes. Except for the common high contrast and the stage, there weren't many tricks. In this respect, Wong Jiawei had a strong personal style, but the use of lighting and color was at a master level. Of course, Wong Jiawei's movie was an indie film. Their movies couldn't be compared at all. After solving the problem of lighting, Eric began to focus on Cruz's performance. This small scene really didn't have anything to show off. Eric didn't want to nitpick. If Cruz's performance could bring unexpected surprises, he would be very happy. If not, he wouldn't be disappointed. As long as it met his personal standards, it would be fine. Anyway, the opportunity had been given to Cruise. Whether he could rely on this movie to get a nomination or even win some acting awards still depended on Cruise's own efforts. Eric was more concerned about the box office of this movie. As for the Oscar prospects that he described to persuade Cruise to agree to the cross-dressing scene, didn't all the directors and producers say the same thing when they persuade actors to join the cast? Eric didn't feel guilty at all. He was more concerned about the box office of the movie. After all, he was still young and didn't have a strong desire for Oscar awards. Focusing on making money was the right thing to do. The theme of Dark War was definitely novel, but whether it could win the favor of the Oscar judges, only God knew. In Fong Yu's previous life, Andy had won the first Hong Kong Film Award. If he thought about it carefully, it might have been because of public relations. In addition, the Hong Kong film industry had declined in all aspects in 1999. There weren't many outstanding films. That was why Andy was able to realize his long-cherished wish of being crowned the Best Film Award. After only 2 or 3 NGs, the scene was passed. The crew began to move to another room in the studio. This process took more than half an hour. A movie didn't really spend a lot of time on shooting scenes. Most of the time was spent on setting up the scenes. Most of the scenes in these 2 days were Cruise's one-man show. He would be in his own room, examining Hank's character, Sean, making the cross-dressing scene, vomiting blood when drinking, and disguising himself as Andy's father Peter to confront the villain. Although he had the original movie in his mind, Eric still designed some scenes so that there would be enough material for post-production. After all, this was a brand new Hollywood movie. Eric couldn't make it exactly the same as the one in his memory. According to the shooting plan, the process would last for 3 days. After the 4th day, there would be a group scene with Hanks and the others. After that, there would be an indoor scene between Cruise and Hanks. Eric was looking forward to that moment. In his previous life, the two superstars didn't interact at all on the silver screen. It was a pity. Because there was plenty of time to shoot this movie, the crew wrapped up after 8 hours. After instructing the assistant director to send the finished scenes to the editing room, Eric left in a hurry. Apart from the movie, he had more things to do than anyone else. The post-production of Dark War also had to wait until the movie was completely wrapped up. The initial casting for Island Horror and Smelling a Woman had been completed. He still had to finalize the cast. Moreover, he had to pay attention to Steel Magnolias, which was far away in Louisiana from time to time. Filming for Steel Magnolias had already started a month ago, but even with Herbert Ross, an old Hollywood film director, he had only completed less than half of the filming. It would take at least another month for the film to be wrapped up, and the post-production would take at least another month. What's more, this movie might even have a risk of over-budget. Eric was happy to see this. Steel Magnolias wasn't Firefly's sole investment. Previously, Herbert Ross had pulled in $3 million alone. Therefore, Eric didn't mind investing another 1 or 2 million yuan in the movie to increase Firefly's share. Eric was now waiting for Herbert Ross to ask for money. "Hey, Eric, how's the wound on your head?" When Eric returned to Firefly's office, he saw Jonathan Dime, who had been waiting there for a long time. Jonathan's face was obviously tired, but his voice was still full of energy. "Thank you, Jonathan. I'm much better now. Did you bring the information?" "Here, I screened out dozens of candidates according to your request." "I'm exhausted," Jonathan said with a smile. He was indeed the most tired person these days. It was all because of Island Horror. Because there were 2 young actors in the script, and because of Stuart Runkle's stimulation, Firefly had received more than 5,000 files of young actors. Many of the children who sent the files had no acting experience at all. Many parents wanted to become rich overnight like Runkle's family, so they sent the files of their children. Some unscrupulous parents deliberately made up lies that their children had made cameo appearances in certain movies or TV series. The staff had to spend a lot of time confirming the authenticity of these files. In this case, it was easy to imagine how difficult it was to screen out potential young actors. Eric had thought of relying on the memory in his mind to directly ask people to find the children with potential. However, the difficulty of such a task was probably even greater than selecting a small actor with potential from 5,000 people. Although Eric's mind had completely replicated the memory of his previous life, there was still a lot of information that he did not know before. If he randomly mentioned the name of a famous Hollywood star in his previous life, the staff might be able to find hundreds of children with the same name in this country. Westerners were known for their lack of creativity when it came to naming. He took a stack of thick files from Jonathan Dime. Not only did it contain the names of the 2 children in Island Horror, there were also the names of the 3 servants, the real-life Victor's family, Grace's husband, and other actors. Although Eric had let Jonathan decide on a few of the less important supporting roles, he still wanted to look through them personally. The first thing Eric checked was the information of 2 of the more important young actors. Eric glanced at the list of 10 young boys and was surprised to see Macaulay Culkin's name. He did not know the names of the other 9 boys. He flipped to Culkin's information. Although he did not have Home Alone, the boy still had the experience of acting in 2 movies. That explained why he was on the list. Jonathan took out Culkin's information and glanced at it curiously. "Eric, do you like this boy?" Eric shook his head. "No, this one has been eliminated." I think this boy named Macaulay Culkin is the most intelligent one among the 10. Eric could not tell Jonathan that he did not want Macaulay Culkin to be as famous as he was in his previous life. Although Island Horror could not bring about the same amount of fame as Home Alone, the impact it would have would not be too small. The best choice was to let Macaulay Culkin act in 1 or 2 mediocre movies from time to time. When the boy grew up, he would be able to choose his own path in the future. If he made the boy famous now, his weird parents would definitely ruin the poor boy for money, just like they did in his previous life. "Jonathan, did you forget that the boy in Island Horror, Nicholas, had a rather dull personality? Looking at the boy's big eyes in the picture, I think he is too smart. That's why I can't do it." Jonathan followed Eric's train of thought and found that it was indeed the case. "All right, I did overlook that." Eric continued to flip through the information of the remaining 9 boys. Suddenly, he raised his head and stared at Jonathan Dime, who was sitting opposite him. He asked, "Jonathan, do you know any of these children?" Jonathan Dime's eyes darted around a few times, and his face turned slightly red. In the end, he nodded, got up, and pulled out the boy's information. This Brian Baker is the youngest son of an actor friend of mine who I used to work with. I'm sorry, Eric, I shouldn't have done this. But I swear, I did a serious interview for this kid and confirmed that he was qualified before I added him." Jonathan was about to crumple the boy's information into a ball and throw it into the bin when he was stopped by Eric. Eric took the boy's information and looked at it carefully. Then, he nodded with satisfaction. "Jonathan, let's do it." "Well, I'm really sorry." Eric, what did you say?" Jonathan came back to his senses and looked at Eric in disbelief. Eric smiled and said, "I said, let's do it. You know, I don't have time to do an interview now. Also, I believe that you won't joke about this movie, right?" Of course." Jonathan nodded affirmatively. This movie was related to his future in Hollywood. Whether or not he could make the leap depended on it. "Then, is there anyone else?" Eric asked again. This time, Jonathan shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not, Eric. The rest of the candidates have nothing to do with me." Eric had done Jonathan a small favor on the spur of the moment. Although he had already given him a big opportunity because of Island Horror, Eric did not mind giving him a little more without giving anything in return. Jonathan Dime was a very good stock with potential. Eric had already decided to rope him in. In addition to the future, The Silence of the Lambs, Hank's first Oscar-winning film, Philadelphia Story, was directed by him. Since the boy had been confirmed, there was no need to look at the rest. He directly opened the file containing the little girl's candidate. It seemed that the saying that Hollywood was actually very small was true. This time, there were actually 2 actresses that he knew, Kirsten Dunst and Sarah Michelle Gellar. Chapter 131. In the photo, Kirsten, who was just 7 years old, was as delicate as a doll. She had blonde hair and a round face. She was wearing a princess dress and a lovely lace sun hat. She also had beautiful blonde bangs on her forehead. It was a pity that Eric knew that this actress would become more and more ugly as she grew up. When she reached adulthood, she would not be as delicate as she was now. Perhaps in the eyes of Westerners, she would not be considered ugly. However, with his Asian aesthetic standards, he could not see anything beautiful about her. If he really had to praise her, he could only say that she had a temperament. It did not seem like he was praising a woman. As for this Lolita who only had a shelf life of 12 years old, Eric chose to pass. This girl did not have much potential. If she was not lucky enough to become Spider-Woman, perhaps this child star would be forgotten after 2,000 years. In the parallel universe, after the end of the Spider-Man trilogy, Kirsten Dunst's career took a nosedive and she almost disappeared from the public eye. He selected another familiar girl, Sarah Michelle Gellar. Compared to Sarah in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this girl had a round face. Although she was almost 12 years old, she still looked very petite. It was not a problem for her to act as a 10-year-old girl. This was probably the reason why Sarah was selected. Compared to Kirsten, who had only acted in New York Story, Sarah had a series of movie names on her resume. Of course, they were not famous. At least, even with Eric's huge viewership, he had not seen any of them. Jonathan, what's your impression of this girl? Eric handed Sarah's information to Jonathan Dime. Jonathan took it and glanced at it. He quickly recalled the scene of Sarah's interview. This child has been acting in movies since she was 4 years old. The acting experience written in her profile is all real. During the interview, the girl had a strong sense of camera. She was natural and unrestrained, and did not have stage fright at all. I talked to her for a while. She is very smart and sensible. Although the girl looks small and skinny, she is already 12 years old. Moreover, she is a little precocious. Her mentality is at least 14 years old. If we use her, compared to those real 10-year-old children, it will be much easier during the filming. Eric took back the information and decided, then she'll be the one. Communicate with her as usual. She has to sign into UTA. Although Eric had told Kapoor that he didn't plan to expand UTA in the next few years, he definitely couldn't let other agencies take advantage of the actors groomed by his film projects. Because of Eric's CAA Revelations article, many agencies began to make drastic changes to their original agency system. Although they couldn't completely imitate CAA's model, CAA's business model was completely exposed by Eric. At the very least, CAA could no longer maintain its superiority in terms of business model. In the future, there would definitely be a situation where the top agencies would rise. Therefore, UTA could calmly and steadily develop without worrying about CAA dominating the market. Eric continued to flip through the other actors' information. It seemed like he had only glanced at it a few times before deciding on the actors in a hurry. Jonathan Dime was not used to it. Eric, don't you need to arrange another round of auditions? Aren't you being a little... You think I'm being too hasty? Eric looked up with a smile. Jonathan scratched his head. Shouldn't you at least watch their audition tapes? Eric circled the most important actor list with a pen. No need, Jonathan. I believe that these people have been carefully selected by you. Any one of them is definitely qualified for the role they need, so I don't need to do this at all. Besides, I really don't have much time. Shock Island needs to start filming as soon as possible. I won't be able to attend the Cannes and Berlin film festivals, but I hope to make it in time for the Venice Film Festival in September. Okay, I'll inform these people as soon as possible. Jonathan nodded in agreement. He seemed to understand something. Perhaps Eric was doing this to show that he was in charge of the project. Although the boy in front of him was young, his desire to control was stronger than those ancient emperors who were always worried about being ousted by their princes. It was just a pity for those actors who had been shortlisted but were not selected. Perhaps they were still excitedly preparing for the third round of auditions, but they were destined to be disappointed. Although this matter seemed unfair, Hollywood was like this. There were all kinds of strange things happening one after another, and there was never any fairness to speak of. After sorting out the pile of information in front of him with Jonathan, Eric asked again, "Do you have a location for the shooting?" "I commissioned a friend in England to find a few mansions on some small islands in the English Channel, but I feel that I need to go there personally to see if it's suitable. In addition, I need to communicate with the owners of those mansions personally. You know, many of those historic mansions belong to British aristocrats. Although these people are now in decline, they still maintain an inexplicable arrogance in their bones, so I have to visit them personally. If they feel respected, things will be much easier." Eric inexplicably remembered some things from his previous life and showed a smile of understanding. Jonathan Dimey suddenly said, "Actually, Eric, if you can come in person, things will be smoother. You're British. A lot of British media now regard you as their pride. If you come in person, those small aristocrats will definitely treat you as a guest of honor. Maybe we can even get the right to use some mansions without spending any money." Eric waved his hand. "Forget it. After so many years, I've even forgotten the British accent now. Besides, I can't leave the crew now. By the time Dark War ends, Shock Island will have been shooting for a long time." The shooting process in the next few days was still very smooth. After all, it was a studio shoot, and there were not as many restrictions as outdoor scenes. Cruise also showed his first-class professionalism. If he hadn't coveted the absolute leadership of Eric's crew from time to time, and always criticized the shooting process, Eric would have been happy to continue working with Tom Cruise in the future. However, the possibility of the two working together again in the future was not high. With Cruise's character, perhaps only a director at the level of Spielberg could use him without losing the leadership. In Zhang Heng's previous life, even if many of Cruise's movies were not directed by him, he still firmly grasped the control of the crew. Even the movie giants who worked with him were not allowed to interfere. Eric and Cruise were the same kind of people in this regard, so the possibility of the two working together in the future was destined to be slim. "Brooke, your expression just now was not right. When you saw Andy vomiting blood, you should have shown panic and helplessness, not disgust. So, your facial expression should have been widened eyes and mouth slightly, not frowning." Eric frowned at this time, raised his arm and knocked on the watch on his wrist. "If 2 more tries still don't work, we'll have to drag it out until the afternoon. You don't want to waste your time and everyone's time, right?" Brooke Shousey stood in front of Eric at this time, her eyes downcast like a little girl who had made a mistake. As for whether she was faking it or not, no one could be sure, but this appearance could always weaken a man's anger. Eric also could not help but reprimand her after 5 or 6 NGs. "Sorry, Eric, I seem to feel something." Eric sighed and said, "Then let's try again. Everyone, get ready." Brooke Shousey sat back in her seat. This was the scene of Andy and Yo-Yo eating together in the small restaurant after the second meeting. Eric still chose to shoot in the studio, not to save money. With a budget of $40 million, there was no need to save money. He just wanted to finish these scattered indoor scenes as soon as possible. The outdoor scenes were a hard bone to crack, and the huge studio in Colombia could fully provide these conditions. Even the street outside the small restaurant was a full-scale model. Although it was noon, the studio could easily create the conditions of the night. "Miss Shousey, don't worry. Take it slow. We have plenty of time. I don't think this is all your problem. Eric is still too young." During the preparation, Cruise chatted with Brooke Shousey eagerly. If Brooke Shousey's performance in a movie directed by Cruise was so bad, he would probably be furious. But now, Cruise seemed to be very willing to see Eric's frustrated face. He himself became a gentleman and tried to get close to the beauty. "Thank you for your comfort, Mr. Cruise," Brooke Shousey responded with a smile. "So, are you free tonight, Miss Shousey? I don't know if I have the honor to have dinner with you." Brooke Shousey raised her eyebrows slightly and subconsciously glanced at Eric not far away. If possible, she would prefer to invite Eric Williams instead of the married man in front of her. However, she couldn't figure out what the young director, who was 5 or 6 years younger than her, was thinking. She was sure that Eric was very interested in her. This was her intuition as a beautiful woman, and she was sure that it was not her own good feeling. When Eric occasionally looked at her, there was an unconcealable eagerness in his eyes, like a 17 or 18-year-old who was eager to have a try. But most of the time, he behaved like a sophisticated middle-aged man, and scrupulously admiring her beauty and body with his experienced eyes. "Mr. Cruz, can I give you an answer in the afternoon? I'm not sure if I have anything else to do tonight." Brooke Shousey declined a little, but she didn't completely refuse. Chapter 132. Between Eric and Cruz, Brooke Shousey preferred the former. If Eric didn't say anything after today's work, Brooke Shousey wouldn't mind having dinner with Cruz to improve her relationship with him. Although she had been making movies since she was 12 years old, she hadn't fully entered the Hollywood circle. She had always been on the periphery. Of course, Brooke's acting skills weren't up to standard, but more importantly, she didn't have many connections in this area. After she became an adult, Brooke had dreamed of marrying the superstar Michael Jackson for a long time. For this reason, she didn't hesitate to publicly announce to the media that she was still a virgin. She herself once felt that this matter was very promising, so for a long time, she wasn't very enthusiastic about her acting career. But after so many years, she realized that Jackson had always treated her as a good friend. Jackson's heart was completely like a child. He wasn't interested in marriage, and his family was very opposed to him marrying her. Brooke, who was already 24 years old this year, had to plan for her future after her dream of marrying into a rich family was completely shattered. Compared with Jackson's childish temperament, Brooke was much more mature and realistic, and she also knew what her greatest asset was. When Cruz heard Brooke's answer, he still said gracefully, "No problem, I hope to hear good news." The two just said a few words when they received a prompt that the scene was ready. Eric sat in front of the monitor and motioned for the script to start. In the camera, Yo-Yo said with a smile, "What's your name?" She didn't get angry at all when she didn't get an answer. She took the initiative to introduce herself. "My name is Yo-Yo." Cut. A very unpleasant sound was heard. Eric stood up, pointed at Brooke, and said loudly, "Curious, curious, how many times have I said that you are very curious about Andy, so open your beautiful eyes a little wider." Again. Everyone in the room felt that Eric was on the verge of exploding. They restarted the camera with trepidation, and at the same time, looked at Brooke worriedly, hoping that this beautiful vase wouldn't make a mistake again. "What's your name?" "My name is Yo-Yo. It's not good for you to know who I am. I read the newspaper that day, and I know what you did." "Thank you." "You're welcome. Unfortunately, I don't have the time," Andy said sadly. He picked up the glass of water in front of him and coughed violently. "So what if I have time?" The moment the question left her mouth, Andy coughed out a mouthful of blood that dyed the glass red. Yo-Yo instinctively took a step back. Her eyes widened and her red lips parted slightly. This time, Brooke Shoals did not frown. "Cut. Very good. It's almost perfect, but Brooke's shocked expression is still not natural enough. There's still some time. Let's do it again." Eric's expression relaxed slightly, and so did everyone in the crew. Once again, the shooting did not go as planned. Brooke Shousey frowned reflexively at the last moment. This kind of natural human reaction was difficult to overcome. Eric could only announce that they would take a break and try a few more times after lunch. Just as he got up and was about to eat, Ellen walked over. "Eric, Miss Julia has been waiting for you outside for a while. She doesn't have a pass, so she can't enter." "Julia?" Eric asked in confusion. "Julia Roberts?" "Yes," Ellen replied. "Isn't she in Louisiana?" Eric asked in confusion and walked out. Ellen's tone was a little strange. "Maybe she came back because you were injured." Eric shrugged and ignored his assistant's teasing. Walking out of the studio, Eric saw a commercial car parked across the street. After Eric appeared at the gate, the car door opened, and Julia, who was dressed simply and fashionably, walked out with her assistant and 2 bodyguards behind her. Almost at the same time, 7 or 8 paparazzi, who had been waiting nearby for a long time, began to take pictures of Julia. "Hey, big star!" Eric walked closer and saw the situation around him. He could not help but shout jokingly, "Hey, big director!" Julia was not to be outdone. The two hugged gently, and this scene immediately caused a burst of crazy clicking sounds. After the paparazzi finished taking pictures, they began to rush forward with their recording devices and quickly ask questions. The questions were nothing more than why Julia had returned to Los Angeles, the progress of the new film, and of course, they did not forget Eric's dark war. Under the protection of the bodyguards and assistants, the two quickly got into Julia's commercial car without saying a word and then started it and left. A large group of paparazzi quickly climbed into their cars and motorcycles and followed. In front of the studio door, Brooke Shousey, who had just walked out to eat lunch across the street, saw this scene and her eyes were full of envy. She had been famous for so long, but she had never enjoyed the escort of paparazzi. Julia, an actress who had risen to fame for only a few months, had easily gained such attention. She looked around in disappointment. There were a few paparazzi waiting outside, hoping to interview the shooting of Dark War, but they had just left with Julia and Eric. A great beauty like her was standing here, but no one came up to take a photo or interview her. The fat security guard with a wretched face in the security booth next to her was staring at her long legs, which made Brooke Shousey even more irritated and disgusted. Brooke Shousey thought of Julia's rise to fame and became eager again. "Maybe I should wait patiently," Brooke Shousey murmured and made up her mind to refuse Cruz's dinner invitation. Compared to Eric, who could provide an opportunity to become famous, although Cruz was famous, he was only an actor after all. And it was impossible to create a scandal with him because Cruz was already married. Doing so would only bring about the opposite effect. If Eric Williams was still indifferent after the shooting of Dark War was completed, Brooke Shousey would also make up her mind to take the initiative to approach him. Before that, she had to wait patiently. There was a big gap between the benefits of taking the initiative and being passive. These two are Hunter and Chris. In the back seat of the business car, Julia took the initiative to introduce her two drivers and bodyguards to Eric. There was a hint of pride in her tone. Before Eric could react, the little freckled assistant, Allison Green, who had been with Julia for a long time, couldn't help but chuckle. Julia awkwardly knocked on her assistant's head. "Allison, be careful or I'll deduct your salary." Eric reached out and raised the soundproof partition between the driver's seat and the back seat, then smiled and said, "Okay, I already know that you are a world-famous star now. Where are we going?" "Not far. I booked a restaurant. We'll be there in 5 or 6 minutes. Don't worry, it won't delay your afternoon shoot," Julia said, pointing to Eric's forehead that was still wrapped in gauze. "What's going on here? I was shocked when I heard the news. I can prove this. At that time, Julia... Ugh." Allison was about to say something, but Julia covered her mouth and glared at her threateningly. "Allison, I'll really deduct your salary." After getting Allison's pleading look, Julia let go of the girl. Eric smiled and teased, "Allison, you can't reveal Julia's privacy in front of outsiders, or the consequences will be very serious." Allison rubbed her little face. "Of course I won't, but Mr. Williams is not an outsider." She was very clear about the matter between Eric and Julia, and in her heart, she also hoped that Eric and Julia could get together. That was why she couldn't help but say that Julia lost her composure when she saw Eric injured and unconscious to get closer to him. Chapter 133. In an exquisite restaurant, Eric finished ordering and watched with interest as Julia elegantly communicated with the waiter and skillfully arranged the tableware in front of her with a smile. "What are you looking at?" Julia felt Eric's gaze and asked curiously. Eric shook his head and said, "Nothing, I just suddenly remembered the first time I met you at Jeff's restaurant. I feel like you've changed a lot." Julia obviously didn't want Eric to mention her most down-and-out period, so she glared at him and said, "Are you trying to take credit?" "Of course not," Eric said with a smile. "I just think it's interesting that Cinderella became a princess in the blink of an eye. Don't mention Hollywood Cinderella in front of me, okay? I'm so annoyed by this title. Julia rolled her eyes. Although this title contained the envy of the media and the public, it was also mixed with a lot of ridicule. Okay, then, why did you suddenly come back? I took on an endorsement and rushed back to shoot the commercial, and I also wanted to visit you. Julia stuttered slightly at the end of her sentence. In fact, she mainly came back to visit Eric. Shooting the commercial could be said to be an excuse. If she wanted, shooting the commercial in Louisiana would not be a problem at all. Anyway, she was in a crew, and a lot of equipment and personnel were ready-made. But after all, Eric was in a coma for more than 10 hours. Although he was safe in the end, this incident caused a stir in Hollywood. Eric single-handedly made her from an unknown actress to a Hollywood superstar. If she didn't show up from beginning to end while Eric's injury was fully recovered, it was inevitable that some media would label her as ungrateful. The reason why Julia waited for Eric outside the studio today instead of visiting him in private was because she wanted to create some exposure. Julia was self-taught in this regard. Although Wind and Moon was still screening, she had disappeared from the media for a whole month. The small town in Louisiana where Steel Magnolias was shot was too remote. In addition, the director, Herbert Ross, was worried about being disturbed by reporters, so the news of the shooting location was tightly sealed. Even if a few paparazzi found the place, they wouldn't be able to get any valuable news. At the same time, Julia was a little afraid of visiting Eric in private. She still remembered the situation when she secretly visited Eric in private. Every time she recalled the scene when she was severely reprimanded by Eric and couldn't help but cry, Julia hated this man who didn't understand her feelings. "Thank you for your concern, Julia," Eric replied seriously. Then, he asked curiously, "By the way, what advertisement are you shooting?" "Lancome's perfume endorsement." Julia raised a few fingers and waved them in front of Eric with a little pride. 1 year, this amount. Wow, that's a huge sum of money. Eric was too lazy to tease her. "I don't mind you being a little vain, but if you want to show off, you should find a suitable partner. Is it really appropriate to do this in front of me? Okay, I know you don't like it. You don't have to look at me like that." Julia pursed her red lips in dissatisfaction. Then, she remembered that her mouth would appear even bigger if she did that. He was dissatisfied with that, so she quickly stopped smiling. "I can't compare to you. I just suffered a small injury, and I attracted the attention of the entire United States. I even stole the limelight of the recent Oscars. It should be said that I acted as a shield for this year's Oscars. If I wasn't injured, this year's Oscars would have received even more criticism." Eric shrugged and replied, "Actually, the Academy should thank me properly. I'm not too sure about that, but when I was in Louisiana, I only saw the director of this year's Oscars, Alan Carl, announce that he would never accept another invitation to direct a gala again. But things shouldn't be as bad as you say, right?" "It's much worse than you think, but I can't tell you too much because I have signed a confidentiality contract with many other presenters and performers. We promised that we wouldn't mention anything about this year's Oscars to the public for the next 20 years. And these days, Disney also came over to join in the fun. They threatened to sue the award ceremony for using Snow White's portrait without permission. Anyway, it's a mess. If it weren't for the fact that my injury attracted most of the media's attention, the Academy would at least have to make a public apology to appease the anger of the media and the public." Julia's eyes widened as she listened to Eric's narration. But in the end, she couldn't understand too much. After all, she didn't personally participate in this year's Oscars. She didn't even have time to watch the award ceremony that night because she had to shoot some scenes. So, the topic quickly shifted to Eric's injury. The girl was most concerned about the injury on Eric's forehead. "Hey, it was inconvenient in the car just now. Can you tell me now? What's with the injury on your forehead? I don't believe it's as simple as falling down the stairs. There must be more to it." Eric spread out his hands helplessly and said, "But that's the truth." "Definitely not." Julia revealed a sly smile. "I read the newspaper carefully a few days ago. After you were injured that day, it was Drew and your girlfriend, Jennifer Aniston, who sent you to the hospital together. And then, Julia leaned forward slightly and said in a low voice, "I think it must be your girlfriend, Jennifer Aniston, who suddenly went to your house that morning and found you and Drew." She impulsively picked up a vase or something and smashed it, right?" Surprise flashed across Eric's face. Although Julia's guess was far from the truth, one thing was true. He was hit by Jennifer Aniston's heart-wrenching talent. Fortunately, Virginia was smart enough to not show up during the whole incident. She only visited him in the hospital with the others after his injury was completely stabilized. Julia keenly caught the momentary change in Eric's expression. Her red lips parted slightly, revealing a surprised expression. "No way, did I guess right?" "Absolutely not, I swear to the lamp." Eric smiled and pointed to the crystal chandelier above his head. "I accidentally fell. My pathology report has been on many newspapers. You must have seen it. I have contusions all over my body. You don't think Jennifer Aniston has the ability to cause such extensive injuries to me, do you?" "That's not necessarily true." The girl looked at Eric from head to toe, unconvinced. She seemed to be thinking about how to cause such injuries. "Forget it, let's not talk about this unpleasant topic. Let's talk about steel magnolias. After all, I only communicated with Mr. Herbert Ross a few times over the phone. Since you're the person involved, how do you feel?" Julia shook her head honestly. She still wasn't sure why Eric had taken a liking to this movie, and why he had forcefully suppressed her salary in order to let her participate in it. In Julia's opinion, Steel Magnolias was a trivial story with no central point at all. A group of housewives lived ordinary lives day after day. There were all kinds of holidays, all kinds of partying, and all kinds of trivial things in life. "I still feel that this story is a little too ordinary. There's no highlight?" Eric was about to answer when the waiter served the dishes they had ordered. He even opened the red wine for them in front of them. After patiently waiting for the waiter to finish all this, Eric fiddled with the dishes in front of him and asked, "Then, what do you think a movie should have?" Julia took a sip of red wine, put down the glass, and thought for a while. She waved her hand and said, At least there should be an unforgettable love story, where the male and female protagonists love each other to death, or a big scene, such as a flying car, an explosion, flames soaring into the sky, or something like that." The girl hurriedly nodded. "Yes, at least there should be these things, right? I won't criticize you since we're in public. If you want to know why, come to my house tonight, and I'll give you a detailed analysis of the elements of a movie's success," Eric said as he narrowed his eyes and sized up the girl opposite him with a smirk on his face. Well, forget it." As if being tickled by Eric's gaze, Julia subconsciously leaned back and hurriedly refused. She knew that if she went, she would definitely be scolded again. Eric was only teasing the girl a little. He quickly put away his cynical expression and analyzed seriously, "Actually, the success or failure of a movie depends on whether the director's story can resonate with the audience. I've carefully studied the script of Steel Magnolias, and it's a good story that puts the warmth of the ordinary into the trivial scenes. While it resonates with the audience, it's also unwittingly tear-jerking." Julia didn't understand, but she nodded as if she was convinced. Then she asked the question she was most concerned about, "How much do you think this movie can get at the box office?" "What do you think?" Eric asked back. Julia hesitated for a moment and raised 2 fingers. She quickly felt that this number was underestimating her, so she added 2 more fingers. After hesitating for a moment, she withdrew 1 finger. She thought that it would be good enough if the movie could get 30 million yuan at the box office. Also, with the scale of the movie's investment, Firefly could still make a small profit. In fact, Julia felt that if she continued to act in romantic comedies, even if it was a relatively similar theme, with the influence of wind and moon, the movie would be able to easily earn 50 to 60 million yuan at the box office. However, Julia really didn't have any confidence in this movie that was about family trivia. "Do you have so little confidence in me?" I just don't have confidence in this movie," Julia said honestly. Eric calmly wiped his mouth with a napkin and smiled. How about we make a bet? I bet this movie won't be less than 50 million yuan at the box office. What's the wager? Julia asked curiously. Eric smirked again. If you lose, you'll come to my house and be my maid for a week. If I lose, I'll be your chauffeur for a week. If it weren't for Eric's sinister expression when he said the word maid, Julia almost agreed. She felt that she had a 70% chance of winning. Also, being a maid in this era was a very serious job. But when she noticed Eric's expression, Julia keenly sensed that something was wrong. She decisively refused. No, I don't want to bet with you. How about 60 million yuan? Not only was Julia not tempted, but she also refused even more firmly. Don't even think about it. Because Eric still had filming in the afternoon, the meal ended in half an hour. However, it also provided a lot of photo material for the paparazzi. In short, there would definitely be a scandal between Eric and Julia in the media tomorrow. After lunch, Julia sent Eric back to the studio. When are you going back to the set? Eric asked when they parted at the entrance of the studio. The flight is at 4 in the afternoon. Julia didn't get out of the car. She replied in the car, by the way, Eric, the shooting budget seems to be insufficient. Maybe we need at least another 2 million USD. Mr. Ross asked you to say that? Julia nodded. Herbert Ross didn't know that Eric had noticed that his budget was tight and was even prepared to increase the budget. Considering that Julia and Eric were close, he asked the girl to test Eric when Julia came back. After all, this was a low-budget movie. If the budget was increased by another 2 million, the cost would reach 10 million US dollars. The box office would have to reach more than 33 million to recoup the cost. Although Julia was joining, Herbert Ross wasn't sure if his family movie without comedy elements would reach a box office of more than 30 million. No problem. Eric nodded. Tell Mr. Ross to ask Jeffrey for money. Then I'll thank you on behalf of Mr. Ross. Julia smiled and said goodbye to Eric before driving away. The first scene in the afternoon was the scene of Andy and Yo-Yo in the small restaurant. For some reason, after the meal, Brooke Shousey returned to the state she was in the morning. She repeatedly NG'd this scene several times. Although the girl repeatedly apologized with a pitiful expression, Eric couldn't help but get angry. At the same time, he drew a big cross in his heart for Brooke Shousey. If I don't work with her anymore, this beautiful vase is really tormenting me. I didn't waste my time winning so many Golden Raspberry Awards. It's better if she continues to harm others in independent movies. At the same time, Eric also dismissed the idea of having a relationship with Brooke Shousey. Hollywood was so big, and there were so many beautiful girls. One more wouldn't make a difference. After half an hour, the scene in the restaurant was finally over. Eric, I'm really sorry. My performance was a bit bad. Brooke Shousey finished a scene, which meant that all her work for the day was done. She packed up her things and went to the dressing room to change her clothes. When she was about to leave, she came up to Eric again. At this time, the woman's clothes were no longer the black professional outfit that she wore in the previous shot. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but the woman was now wearing a pair of tight dark blue high-waisted jeans. Her slender long legs were exposed in front of everyone without any cover. Almost all the men in the crew intentionally or unintentionally cast their eyes on the girl. At the same time, they remembered Brooke Shousey's famous jeans advertisement. Many people even had a thought in their minds. Was there really nothing between the girl and the jeans now? Although Eric dismissed some of the thoughts, he didn't mind taking advantage of this kind of girl. Admiring Brooke Shousey's delicate appearance and perfect body curves, his expression softened a little. It's okay, Brooke. I hope you can seriously experience your remaining scenes when you go back. Those are all outdoor scenes. If you waste too much time like this, it will definitely affect the shooting progress and consume unnecessary budget. Well, I will definitely work hard. Brooke Shousey nodded and looked at Eric seriously. Her high heels rubbed against the floor a few times, and her long legs also followed in a slightly seductive posture. After waiting for a few seconds, she found that Eric had already looked away. He had no intention of inviting her to dinner at all. Brooke Shousey didn't dare to be too obvious. If she was rejected by Eric, then she might be laughed at by the crew, especially Cruz, who was clearly rejected by her before. Therefore, she could only say with some disappointment, "Then goodbye, Eric." "Goodbye. Someone will inform you of the next scene." Eric raised his chin and nodded at the girl. He pinched a pencil and made a few marks on the script. He then turned and began to tell his assistant something. Brooke Shousey paused for a few seconds and could only leave in disappointment. She had just hinted so clearly, but Eric was still indifferent. This made Brooke Shousey feel a little frustrated. How long will it take for Hanks to arrive? Eric didn't care about Brooke Shousey's departure. Although he also noticed the other party's hint, since he had already made a decision, he would certainly not change it. In Hollywood, if you couldn't resist the temptation, it was likely to lead to very bad results. 10 minutes, Alan said. Okay, hurry up and clean up here. Let's move to another set. Eric looked at his watch and thought secretly. Cruz's one-man show had been completed. Next, Eric planned to shoot a few scenes of Cruz and Hanks in the small bar. Today would also be the first confrontation between the two protagonists. Thinking of the almost parallel acting careers of these two big names in his previous life, Eric couldn't help but feel a little excited. He was looking forward to what kind of sparks would be created when the two of them acted together. Chapter 134. Hi, Tom. As soon as Hanks appeared in the studio, Eric greeted him warmly. He preferred the mild-tempered Hanks compared to Cruz, who had always been polite to each other. Hi, Eric, I'm not late, am I? Hanks asked as he hugged Eric. Of course not. Eric nodded to Hanks' assistant and turned to Hanks. It will take about 15 minutes to set up the scene. You can take the opportunity to do your makeup. The two walked side by side to the dressing room. Hanks greeted the crew members warmly. He looked around and asked curiously in a low voice, "Where's Cruz?" "Maybe he went to touch up his makeup," Eric said lightly. Hanks nodded and did not say anything. After several meetings, Hanks did not have a good impression of the actor who shared the same name as himself. Cruz was too arrogant. Even if he was polite to someone, it would still make people feel like they were being given charity. Everyone in the crew had already completed the makeup process, so it did not take too long for Hanks to do his makeup. After the breakfast scene was set up, Nickel, the cameraman, walked to Eric, who was talking to Hanks and Cruz. "Eric, you'd better come and take a look." Eric apologized to the two superstars and got up to follow Nickel to the corner of the restaurant where a camera was set up. "Eric, look here. There will be a quick sweep later, but I can only operate the camera from this position." Nickel demonstrated awkwardly. "You see, this is a little difficult to operate. It's very awkward, and it's hard to control the strength." Although Eric was not as professional as Nickel, he knew a lot of shooting techniques. He stepped forward and tried to operate the camera. It was really awkward, but the best position was occupied by the wall behind him. "Nickel, what do you think?" Eric put down the camera and asked as he clapped his hands. "I can only try a few times. This position is the best shooting angle. If it doesn't work, and you want the best effect..." Nickel pointed behind Eric. "Then we can only tear down this wall." "Let's try a few times first," Eric said. He did not mind tearing down the wall. After all, this was a studio, not an outdoor scene. Columbia would definitely cooperate, but at least it would waste another hour. "Okay." Nickel nodded. "Then let's start." The small restaurant scene had a total of 3 scenes. In the first scene, the two of them were eating breakfast as complete strangers. Of course, according to the plot, Andy had begun to pay attention to Sean at this time, but Sean was completely unaware. In the second scene, the two of them brushed shoulders. Andy left a teacup cushion with the number 13 written on it for Sean. The third scene was also the longest one. Andy used 1 minute to convince Sean to cooperate with the police to capture the big villain, the bald monk, and avenge his father. Attention all personnel, Dark War, Act 12, Scene 1, Action. Sean stared at the newspaper in front of him and ate his cake. When he heard the restaurant door open, he naturally looked up and quickly turned his eyes back to the newspaper. Good. Eric gave Hanks a thumbs up. Next was the scene of Andy, played by Cruz, eating while staring at the TV above his head. This scene was not difficult for Cruz at all. Eric gave him a thumbs up as well. In the original version, this scene would appear 3 times. This should be an animation that Andy liked very much. Unfortunately, with only 4 weeks left to live, every time he saw this familiar scene, Andy would feel sad that he didn't have much time left. This was also the reason why Andy would be in a daze every time he saw this scene. And here, Eric did not intend to use a random animation to make up the numbers. He planned to use the scenes from Friends. Although Friends only existed in Eric's plan now, when Island Horror and Smell a Woman were on the right track, Jeffrey would start preparing for Friends. It was only April now. As long as the 6 protagonists could be confirmed, Eric would have enough time to shoot a few classic scenes from Friends and add them to the movie. The new movie would have a TV series directed by Eric Williams himself, which was a good gimmick for the movie's promotion. At the same time, it would promote Friends, which was another win-win situation. After the 2 scenes were completed, it was time for the most difficult scene, the shake shot. After the script was done, Eric stared at the monitor. Eric operated the camera to stop on Hank's face for a second and then began to shake rapidly. Eric clearly felt the difficulty and unevenness of the change of scene. Although the camera stopped accurately on Cruz's side profile in the end, Eric could only shout, "Cut." Next, Nickel tried 6 more times in a row, but all of them ended in failure. Eric knew the reason for the flaw in the shot, so he patiently let Nickel try again and again. But after the 11th failure, Cruz finally became a little impatient. He had eaten many pieces of cream cake in a row and did not understand why he had to try so many times for such a simple shot. While the staff adjusted the camera back to its original position, Cruz stood up and glanced at Nickel, whose forehead was full of sweat, with some contempt. He said to Eric, "Eric, maybe I can introduce a better cameraman to you." Cruz did not intend to lower his voice at all. He said this in front of everyone, and the scene immediately became awkward. Due to his awkward posture, Nickel had to operate the machine more than 10 times in a row. His waist was starting to hurt. He didn't expect that his efforts would receive such an evaluation. He wanted to glare at Cruz, but he was afraid that it would make things difficult for Eric. He could only stand there helplessly. Many people in the crew were dissatisfied with Cruz's rude words. They had worked with Nickel for many years and knew Nickel's ability very well. Although they had just experienced more than 10 failures in a row, they more or less understood the reason from Nickel's posture when operating the camera. They patiently accompanied Nickel to try again and again. Facing the gaze of the crowd, Eric knew that this matter had to be handled carefully, otherwise it would cause a conflict between the crew and the actors. However, it was not easy to appease Cruz's emotions and not arouse the dissatisfaction of the staff. After thinking for a moment, Eric could only stand up and walk to the camera. He patiently explained to Cruz why this shot was so easy to fail. After listening to Eric's explanation, Cruz also realized that he had just wronged Nickel. He shrugged and smiled faintly at the cameraman. "I'm really sorry. Then, let's continue." After that, Cruz sat back in his seat again. Eric patted Nickel's shoulder comfortingly and said softly, "Try 2 or 3 more times. If it still doesn't work, we'll tear down the wall." Nickel knew that Eric had been very protective of him by personally explaining the reason to Cruz, so he did not mind Cruz's insincere apology. Instead, he nodded gratefully to Eric. "I'll try my best." Although this small incident seemed to have passed easily, it was destined to leave some traces in many people's hearts. Anyway, several crew members who had a very good impression of Cruz because of his series of movies were no longer enthusiastic about him. Perhaps it was luck or other reasons, but the second attempt finally passed. When Eric shouted, "Good," many people could not help but applaud. Nickel also breathed a sigh of relief and shook his sore arm hard. Next, the second scene where the two of them brushed past each other was also easily passed. Finally, It was the first scene where Cruz and Hanks acted together. "Hey, Inspector, you're so early?" The waitress at the restaurant saw Sean open the door and greeted him warmly. "Yes, I have an appointment with a friend," Sean replied and walked to the bar. Andy's mouth was stuffed with pastries. When he heard Sean's words, he smiled with a smug expression. These days, he had fooled Sean, an elite police officer who used to be all-powerful, in circles. He was indeed proud of himself. Sean came to Andy with a sullen face and slapped a teacup with the number 13 on it on the bar. "Have a seat," Andy said, putting down the cup. Sean took out a photo from his suit pocket. "You're very accurate, Mr. Zhang." "Did you find it?" Andy turned his head. "You stole the gem and avenged your father. Why did you ask me to come out? I told you that this game would take 3 days." Sean pointed to the pocket where he usually kept his ID. "You're not in charge now. I'm a police officer. Clean up the warehouse, change the light tubes." As soon as Cruz finished his line, Eric shouted for him to stop. "Here's the thing, Cruz, your smile has to be more sarcastic." Eric first walked to Cruz and gave his opinion. At the same time, he grinned and wanted to demonstrate for Cruz, but found that he did not have the talent of demonstrating everything to actors like Sue Quebec. He could only say in disappointment, "Well, let's stop for 2 minutes. You can think about it." After instructing Cruz, Eric turned to Hanks. "Hanks, you're too embarrassed to hear Andy's ridicule. Although you're very embarrassed in your heart, you also have your own self-esteem. So, when you're embarrassed, you need to do some body language, such as nodding, to cover up your embarrassment." "Well, Eric, I'll think about it." Hanks nodded. Chapter 135. Eric returned to his seat. 2 minutes later, the filming began again. This scene was more than 3 minutes long, so it was impossible to finish it in one go. Eric divided the 3-minute scene into 7 sub-scenes of less than 30 seconds on average. For every scene, Eric strove to achieve perfection. Therefore, the number of NGs far exceeded the other scenes he had shot in the past few days. Cruz and Hanks gradually seemed to realize something. They became more and more strict with their performance. In the end, it was obvious that they were competing with each other. Sometimes, when Eric felt that the effect was good enough, Cruz or Hanks would take the initiative to point out the flaws in their performance and ask for a retake. Eric was quite happy to see this happen. He did not know when the two superstars would work together again. Perhaps they would never have the chance to work together again. Therefore, Eric also wanted to leave a perfect scene in this movie. Cut. After another NG, Eric looked at his watch. It had been more than an hour since the last scene began. Out of the 7 sub-scenes of 3 minutes, only 5 of them had been completed. The 2 most important scenes, Andy's lobbying, had not been filmed. However, it was already time to get off work. Looking at Cruz and Hanks, who were still sparking, and Joe Pacey, who had been waiting for nearly an hour to act as the inspector of the Key Case Investigation Unit, Eric reminded them. "It's time to get off work, you two." After Eric finished speaking, he looked at Cruz and Hanks with anticipation. As an Asian, he did not have any objection to working overtime. In fact, he felt that it was a matter of course. In his heart, he also wanted to complete the 1-hour overtime scene. Therefore, he hoped that the two would take the initiative to propose to work overtime to complete the scene. However, Eric realized that he had seriously underestimated the stubbornness of Europeans and Americans when it came to the 8-hour working day. When they heard Eric's words, Cruz and Hanks, who were originally eager to give it a try, stood up and shook hands with a smile. They looked like they had met their match. Then, they said goodbye to Eric and began to pack their things to leave. From beginning to end, they had no intention of working overtime. Eric complained in his heart. He could only shrug helplessly and announce that the crew was done. After that, Eric took the time to walk over to Joe Pacey. "Sorry, Joe. I made you wait for an hour in vain." Joe Pacey didn't mind at all. He shook his head and said in his unique voice, "It's nothing, Eric. I've been watching a wonderful performance for an entire hour. I'm a little worried that my performance won't be as good as I expected. You don't have to worry about that at all. I think Hanks should be the one worried. I think he could be stolen by your character at any time. Your character's lines and actions are too funny. That's true, but I haven't acted in a comedy before. You know, The Raging Bull and Once Upon a Time in America that I've acted in, as well as the recent Raging Bull, aren't comedies. Joe, I think you're more suited for comedy. Maybe after this movie, you'll discover your talent for comedy. To be honest, you know Home Alone, right? When I was shooting this movie, I thought that you'd be the most suitable actor to play the role of the older, stupid thief Harry. Joe Pesci's eyes widened slightly. He felt that Eric wasn't lying to him at all. This was Home Alone, a movie that was about to break $300 million at the box office. Then why? Joe Pesci made a meaningless gesture. Of course, he knew what it meant to miss out on Home Alone. Eric understood what he meant. He shrugged helplessly and explained, because I couldn't afford to hire you at the time. The budget for Home Alone was too small. Maybe, you could have tried to invite me at the time. You know that's impossible. If I asked you to pay the current Harry actor $20,000, you would have rejected it without even thinking about it. Joe Pesci understood that this was the case. Although he wasn't a famous actor, he was still nominated for the Best Supporting Actor award. Unless he could predict the future, he definitely wouldn't accept $20,000. Joe Pesci shook his head and said, "This is really regrettable. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. Don't we have a chance to work together now? This is really... Eric, you're bringing this up now because you want me to lose sleep tonight. I can't believe I missed such a good opportunity. Everyone will miss thousands of opportunities in their life, so this isn't a big deal. Go back and wash your face, brush your teeth, take a bath, and if you can't do it, drink a few sips of wine. You'll forget about it after a good night's sleep." Eric patted Joe Pesci's shoulder and comforted him. "How can I forget about it?" Joe Pesci rolled his eyes at Eric and shook his head. "Forget it, I'll go back first. This is really..." Seeing Joe Pesci leave with a disappointed expression, Eric began to regret telling him the news. He originally wanted to use this small matter to get closer to Joe Pesci. Hopefully, Joe Pesci wouldn't become Xianglin Saw and repeatedly say, "I can't believe I missed out on Home Alone." After arranging everything, Eric was about to leave. However, at the entrance of the studio, he saw the director of Smelling Women, Martin Brewster. His assistant was carrying a thick stack of documents. Eric knew what was inside. After greeting him, Eric asked, "Martin, didn't you say that the list of candidates would only be confirmed the day after tomorrow? Why is it so fast?" "Sorry, Eric. The original plan was the day after tomorrow, but due to various reasons, the selection was completed 2 days in advance. Al also wants to start filming as soon as possible, so I can only wait for you here." "Why isn't Al here?" Eric asked curiously. Martin explained, "Al has already started to figure out the role. He's been adapting to the lifestyle of a blind person for the past few days. He specifically told me not to disturb him." Eric nodded in understanding. After thinking for a while, he pointed at a Passat parked not far from Martin. "Is that your car?" Martin nodded. "Then let's talk in the car. I happen to be going to Malibu. Is it convenient for you to send me there?" "Of course." The few of them got into the car. Eric told Martin's assistant the address, and Martin's assistant started the car. In the back seat, Eric first opened the list of candidates for one of the most important leads, the middle school student Charlie Simmons. Martin explained, "Eric, these are all outstanding young people who have passed 2 rounds of auditions. As there are more middle school students, there are a total of 30 candidates. After you choose the actor to play Charlie Simmons, we can directly choose a series of Charlie's classmates from the remaining list." "Okay." Eric took out a thick stack of documents from the folder and asked casually, "By the way, what about Miss Gabrielle Anwar, who I introduced?" Martin felt that the petite girl might have some relationship with Eric, so he explained in detail. After her role was confirmed, the girl went back to England a few days ago, but she came back very quickly. She's currently staying in a hotel on Wilshire Avenue. By the way, when you were in a coma, she also went to visit you. Eric, do you need the address of her hotel? That won't be necessary, Eric said casually as he scanned the list. The 30 candidates were arranged in alphabetical order according to the actors' surnames. Thus, Eric saw the names of 2 Hollywood superstars side by side at the beginning of the D letter. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.